Hello guys. Welcome to Pika Fiction. So in this video, we will see what if Ash was raised by the creation trio, Palkia, Dialga, Giratina, and got a harem. If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1. The boy who fell from time gravity in the distortion world was less a law and more of a polite suggestion. Islands of purple earth and twisted obsidian floated in a void of bruised twilight. Waterfalls cascaded upwards, shattering into mist that smelled of ozone and ancient dust. In this place, silence wasn't empty. It was heavy, a living thing that pressed against the skin. Ash Ketchum exhaled, his breath visible even though the temperature here never changed. He stood upside down on the underside of a floating ruin, his feet anchored to the stone by a thin film of manipulated gravity. He was 18. Though time flowed strangely here, knitting his muscles into cords of lean, dense wire. He wore a tunic woven from Giratina's shed silk, tougher than Kevlar, black as a starless night, with trimmings of pearl and diamond dust. Too slow, a voice rumbled. It didn't come from the air, it vibrated directly in his marrow. The shadow struck before the sound finished. A tendril of pure antimatter, thick as a redwood trunk, lashed out from the void. Ash didn't panic. He didn't even blink. His eyes, a piercing, unnatural reddish-brown, flared. In his perception, the seconds stretched. He saw the attack as a series of still images. Dialga's sight. He stepped to the left, not by pushing off his legs, but by folding the space between his current position and the next. Palkia's stride. The tendril smashed the ruin where he had been standing a microsecond prior, pulverizing the stone into dust. Ash reappeared 10 feet away. Right side up, hovering in the empty air. "You're favoring your left side, father," Ash said, his voice raspy from disuse. He spoke the language of humans, but the cadence was old, rhythmic, like the grinding of tectonic plates. From the shadows, the renegade rose. Giratina, the great dragon of antimatter. He was colossal, a serpentine nightmare of gold, gray, and crimson, his 6 wings dripping with shadowy smoke. To the human world, a god of destruction. To Ash, the entity that had found a crying 5-year-old wandering a tear in reality and decided, against all logic, to keep him. "And you talk too much during a hunt," Giratina projected, the telepathy carrying a tone of amusement. "Your spatial stepping is sloppy. You are tearing the fabric, not sliding through it. Palkia would weep to see it." "Palkia weeps if I track mud in the hall," Ash countered, dropping to land on a passing chunk of rock. He wiped sweat from his forehead. "Again?" "No." Giratina's massive head lowered, the glowing red eyes narrowing. The playful malice vanished, replaced by a cold, vibrating tension. "Something has broken." Ash straightened, his posture shifting instantly from sparring partner to predator. "Where?" "The material world. The crust. Someone has driven a spike into the ribcage of the world." The void shimmered. Reality peeled back like wet paper, revealing the Hall of Origin, a crystalline platform existing between dimensions. Dialga and Palkia were already there. Palkia, the master of space, looked agitated, the pearls on his shoulders dimming. Dialga, the lord of time, stood frozen, the fan-like structure on his back ticking erratically. Ash stepped through the rift Giratina created, entering the hall. The pressure here was immense, enough to crush a normal human. But Ash walked through it as if it were a gentle breeze. "Report," Ash said, looking at Palkia. He didn't bow. One did not bow to family. A rupture. Palkia's voice was like the sound of glass breaking underwater. "Coordinates. Mount Coronet. The northern slopes. Someone is testing a weapon. It utilizes frequencies that destabilize the binding energy of space itself. We cannot intervene directly," Dialga added, his voice the ticking of a universal clock. "If we manifest physically in the material plane right now, the resulting energy displacement would shatter the Sinnoh region. The wound is too fresh." Ash cracked his knuckles. The sound echoed in the holy chamber. "So you need a scalpel, not a hammer." Giratina coiled around the perimeter of the hall. "Go, little shadow. Find the source. Break it, if they resist. Send them to you," Ash finished. He checked the wrappings on his forearms. He carried no weapons. He carried no Pokeballs. He needed neither. How long has it been since I was down there? 13 years, Dialga said. The world has changed, Ash, you have not. Good, Ash muttered, walking toward the edge of the platform where the view looked down into the swirling chaotic clouds of the human dimension. I hate change. He didn't ask for a safe passage, he simply leaned forward and let gravity take him. The transition between dimensions was violent. It felt like being pushed through a sieve. The warmth of the hall vanished, replaced by a screaming, biting cold that sought to freeze the blood in his veins. Ash slammed into the snowbank with the force of a meteor. The impact crater was 10 feet wide. Steam hissed as his aura, a faint, violet outline, burned off the surrounding snow. Ash groaned, sitting up and shaking the ice from his messy black hair. The gravity here felt oppressive, dragging at his bones. The air was thin, sharp, and lacked the metallic taste of the distortion world. He stood up in the center of the crater. He was on the side of a mountain. A blizzard was raging, a whiteout of wind and ice that would have blinded a normal man. Ash narrowed his eyes, adjusting his pupils. The wind howled, but beneath the gale, he heard something else. Screaming. Human screaming. And the roar of something that sounded like a Pokemon, but wrong, it sounded hollow. Ash moved. He didn't run. Running was a waste of energy. He flowed. He pushed off the snow, his boots finding purchase where there should be none, clearing 20 feet in a single stride. He moved through the blizzard like a shark through water. He crested a ridge and looked down into a small valley. 3 humans were huddled behind a generated light screen, their parkas ripped, their faces pale with hypothermia and terror. A Luxray lay unconscious in the snow near them, its breathing shallow. Towering over them was an Abomasnow, but it wasn't right. Its eyes weren't the calm blue of a guardian. They were burning with a static gray light. Its fur was matted with metallic shards, and a collar of humming machinery was clamped around its neck. The creature roared, and the sound carried a frequency that made Ash's teeth ache. It raised a massive, ice-encrusted fist to shatter the failing light screen. Ash didn't announce himself. He pushed off the ridge, dropping 50 feet in silence. The Abomasnow's fist came down. The humans screamed, squeezing their eyes shut. Crack. The sound wasn't a screen breaking, it was the sound of a fist hitting an open palm. The lead researcher, a woman with frosted glasses, opened one eye. She gasped. Standing between the monster and the humans was a boy. He wasn't wearing a heavy coat, just a strange, shimmering black tunic. He had caught the Abomasnow's fist, a limb the size of a boulder, with one hand. His boots had sunk deep into the bedrock, cracking the stone, but his arm hadn't buckled. The Abomasnow paused, confused. The machine on its neck whirred aggressively, overriding the confusion with rage. It tried to pull back, but Ash's grip was iron. Quiet, Ash said. His voice cut through the wind, flat and authoritative. The Abomasnow roared and swung its other fist. Ash didn't block this time. He stepped forward, inside the creature's guard. He released the first hand and placed his palm flat against the beast's chest, right over the heart. Pulse. He didn't shout the attack. He merely expelled a focused burst of kinetic energy. The impact was localized but devastating. The massive snow creature was lifted off its feet and launched backward, slamming into the cliff face 20 yards away. The ice on its body shattered, raining down like glass. The humans stared, paralyzed. This wasn't a Pokemon battle. There were no commands, no flashing lights, just brutal, efficient violence. The Abomasnow groaned, the gray light in its eyes flickering. The collar sparked. It tried to rise, the machine forcing it past its physical limits. Ash walked toward it. The snow crunched under his boots. That tech, he muttered to himself, observing the collar. It's dampening the infinity energy. It's hurting him. The beast charged again, a desperate, blind tackle. Ash sidestepped, a blur of motion. As the beast passed, Ash reached out, his fingers hooking into the metal collar. With a grunt of exertion, he ripped the device clean off. Sparks showered the snow. The Abomasnow crashed face first into a drift and went still. The gray light faded from its eyes, replaced by unconscious darkness. It was breathing, finally at peace. Ash tossed the sparking collar aside. He crushed it under his heel for good measure. Silence returned to the mountain, save for the wind. He turned to the humans. They were staring at him as if he were a ghost. The light screen flickered and died, The researcher in the front, shivering violently, stepped forward. She held a device in her hand. A Pokédex, scanning him instinctively. It pinged with an error. Who? She stammered, her teeth chattering. Who are you? Where is your Pokémon? Ash tilted his head. He looked at the shivering humans, then at the unconscious Luxray. He felt a strange sensation in his chest, pity? Annoyance? My name is Ash, he said. He walked over to the Luxray. He knelt, placing a hand on the lion's flank. A soft, golden glow transferred from his palm to the beast. The Luxray took a deep breath, its pain receding. Ash stood up and looked the woman in the eye. His gaze was intense, lacking the social softness humans usually had. You shouldn't be here. The mountain is angry. We were measuring the energy spikes, the man behind her said, clutching a broken scanner. The readings. They went off the charts. And then the Pokémon went crazy. Not crazy, Ash corrected. Tortured. He pointed to the crushed collar. Who put that on him? We don't know, the woman cried. We found it like that, it attacked us. Ash studied her heartbeat. It was erratic, terrified, but honest. He nodded once. Go, he said, pointing down the mountain path. The storm is breaking to the east. If you move now, you'll live. We can't just leave you, the woman said, gaining a sliver of courage. You're freezing. You have no gear. Come back to the station with us. Ash looked down at his tunic. He didn't feel the cold. The cold was just slower energy. I have work to do. Wait. The woman reached out, grabbing his arm. A mistake. Instinct took over. Before she could blink, Ash had twisted her arm behind her back and pinned her against the ice wall. It wasn't malicious. It was the reflex of someone raised in a world where everything tried to eat you. Don't touch me, he hissed. The woman cried out in pain. Ash blinked, the red hue in his eyes fading back to brown. He released her immediately, stepping back. He looked at his own hands, frowning. Sorry, he said stiffly. Reflex. The woman rubbed her shoulder, eyeing him with a mix of fear and fascination. You're not a trainer, are you? No, Ash said, turning away to face the unending white of the blizzard. I'm the janitor. He bent his knees and launched himself into the air, scaling the cliff face in 3 impossible bounds, vanishing into the storm before they could ask another question. Ash sat on the peak of a jagged spire, overlooking the vast expanse of the Sinnoh region. From up here, the world looked like a map. He could see the lights of Eterna City twinkling in the distance, a cluster of stars trapped on the ground. He could feel the hum of millions of lives, tiny, fragile, fleeting lives. He pulled a small, hexagonal scale from his pocket, a scale from Dialga. It was warm. The collar was just a prototype, he whispered to the wind. They aren't just hunting Pokémon. They're trying to leash the energy of the type itself. He sensed a presence behind him, not a human, a Pokémon. He didn't turn. You can come out. I saw you 3 miles ago. A Dragapult phased through the rock, floating beside him. It was smaller than average, but its spectral tail burned with a high-intensity phantom fire. This was Phantomp, a gift from Giratina when Ash turned 10. A chaotic, mischievous spirit that refused to stay in a ball. Not that Ash owned one. Fast meat. Scared meat, the Dragapult chittered telepathically, referring to the humans. They're fragile, Ash said, stroking the dragon's translucent head. But they built that collar. Do not underestimate them, Phantomp. The Dragapult purred, curling around Ash's neck like a scarf. Ash stood up, looking toward the north, where a faint gray pillar of light was barely visible against the night sky. The source of the disturbance. The wound in the world. We have a long walk, Ash said. Fly? Phantomp suggested. No, Ash replied, his eyes hardening. If I fly, I might miss the trail. We walk, we hunt. He took a step off the spire, falling into the darkness, only to catch himself on a gust of wind, sliding down the mountain slopes toward civilization. Toward the lights. Toward the war that was waiting for him. For the first time in 13 years, the Walker of the Veil had returned, and he was already late. Chapter 1 and Chapter 2. The Champion's Interest. Celestic Town smelled of old paper and burning sage. It was a quiet place, a sanctuary dedicated to the memory of myths that most of the modern world had relegated to bedtime stories. Ash Ketchum did not like it. It felt curated, like a museum exhibit of a house he had actually lived in. He stood before the massive fresco in the center of the ruins. It depicted the lake guardians, Azulf, Mespert, Euxi, encircling the primal sphere of Palkia. Tourists usually snapped photos here, bought ice cream, and moved on. But it was midnight. The tourists were gone. The mist had rolled in from the mountain, thick and clinging. Ash ran a gloved hand over the stone carving of Palkia's pearl. "The aspect ratio is wrong," he muttered, his voice echoing slightly in the empty plaza. "Palkia's shoulders are broader. And he doesn't hold the sphere. The sphere is the space around him." Critics everywhere, Phantom hissed, phasing in and out of visibility near Ash's ear. "Smells like strong meat here, powerful meat." Ash stiffened. The hair on the back of his neck stood up, not from fear, but from the static charge of a massive aura entering his range. He didn't turn around. He continued staring at the fresco. "You have 3 seconds to identify yourself," a woman's voice said behind him. It was a calm voice, velvety and rich, but it carried the weight of an executioner's blade. "Before my Garchomp decides you look like a chew toy." Ash turned slowly. Standing at the entrance of the ruin was Cynthia, the champion of Sinnoh. She looked exactly as the data streams in the human cities portrayed her, though the screens didn't do justice to her presence. She wore her signature black overcoat, the fur trim fluttering in the wind. Her blonde hair fell over one eye, obscuring it, but the visible gray eye was locked onto him like a sniper scope. Beside her, the air distorted with heat. A Garchomp, massive, scarred, and radiating predatory intent, stepped out of the gloom. The dragon's claws flexed, gouging deep grooves into the ancient cobblestones. "I'm reading the wall," Ash said simply. He didn't raise his hands. Cynthia raised an eyebrow. "At 2 in the morning? In a restricted heritage site? Dressed like?" She swept her gaze over his strange, shimmering tunic. "An extra from a historical drama?" The gate was open, Ash lied. He had stepped through the space between the bars. "The gate is locked with a biometric mag seal," Cynthia corrected, stepping forward. Her heels clicked rhythmically on the stone. "You're a grave robber. Or a vandal. Either way, you're coming with me." "No," Ash said. It wasn't a challenge, it was just a statement of fact. He turned back to the wall to trace a line of unknown text. "This translation is messy. It says, 'The light pours from the rift,' but the syntax implies, 'The light tears the rift.' The distinction is important." Cynthia stopped. The scholar in her ward with the champion. She looked at the text. He was right. It was an obscure dialect of High Ancient Sinnoh, something only a handful of professors understood. "Who are you?" she asked, her tone shifting from law enforcement to curiosity. "Ash. Just Ash? No surname? No trainer ID? I don't have an ID." Cynthia sighed, signaling her Garchomp. "Then you're a trespasser with no identification defacing a national monument. Garchomp, restrain him. Gently, I want to question him." The land shark didn't need a verbal command to attack, it blurred. Garchomp was fast, Mach speed fast. To a normal human, it would have been instant teleportation. One moment it was 20 feet away, the next, a glowing white dragon claw was swinging for Ash's midsection, intended to wind him and pin him to the wall. Ash didn't move, not until the claw was an inch from his ribs. Time dilation. Ash pivoted on his heel. He didn't dodge away, he dodged into the attack. He slipped into the blind spot under the Garchomp's swinging arm. As the dragon's momentum carried it forward, Ash placed his palm against the Garchomp's scaly hip and pushed, adding his own kinetic force to the dragon's speed. The Garchomp stumbled, its claws carving a trench into the fresco wall, missing the historical carving by inches. "Watch the art," Ash scolded. Cynthia's eyes widened. "What?" The Garchomp roared, embarrassed and furious. It spun, tail glowing with metallic sheen, iron tail. It swept the area, a low strike meant to shatter legs. Ash jumped. But he didn't just jump, he kicked off the air itself, a faint ripple of pink energy flaring under his boot soles. He flipped over the sweeping tail, landing silently on the Garchomp's back. "Phantom, suppress," Ash murmured. The Dragapult materialized from the ether, wrapping its spectral body around Garchomp's snout, blinding the land shark. Garchomp thrashed, bucking like a bronco. Ash rode the motion, his balance supernatural. He wasn't fighting the dragon, he was flowing with it, anticipating every muscle twitch before it happened. Enough! Cynthia commanded. The pressure in the ruin spiked. Cynthia's aura flared, a terrifying, cold dominance. Garchomp froze instantly. Phantomp hissed but loosened its grip, fading back into invisibility at a nod from Ash. Ash backflipped off the dragon, landing in a crouch before straightening up. He wasn't even breathing hard. Cynthia stared at him. She had seen Masters battle. She had fought gods. But she had never seen a human move like that. He hadn't used a single Pokemon move. He had outmaneuvered her ace with simple physics and precognition. "You're not a trainer," she said softly. It was a realization, not a question. "I told you." Ash brushed dust off his tunic. "I'm a janitor. I clean up messes." Cynthia walked toward him, ignoring her confused Garchomp. She stopped 2 feet from him. She was tall, but he matched her height. Up close, she saw the strangeness in his eyes. The way the pupils seemed to have depth, like tunnels. "You possess aura," she deduced. "And something else. Spatial manipulation? Psychic anchoring?" "Does it matter?" Ash asked. "I fixed your translation." Cynthia let out a short, surprised laugh. It was a rich, genuine sound. "You break into a ruin, humiliate my Garchomp, and all you care about is the grammar on a 3,000-year-old wall?" "History is important," Ash said, his face dead serious. "If you read it wrong, you make the same mistakes again." The air between them changed. It wasn't hostile anymore. It was charged with a heavy, magnetic tension. Cynthia felt a thrill she hadn't felt in years. The excitement of a puzzle she couldn't immediately solve. He was dangerous, beautiful in a sharp, jagged way, and completely utterably confusing. She smirked, crossing her arms. "You're under arrest, Ash." "I can leave," Ash said calmly. "You can't catch me." "I know," Cynthia admitted. "But if you leave, you'll miss the chance to see the real texts. The ones locked in my private library in the League HQ. Texts that talk about the rift you mentioned." Ash paused. The offer hung in the air. "You're bribing me," he said. "I'm negotiating," Cynthia corrected. "I'll drop the trespassing charges. You come with me. I want to know how a boy moves faster than a mock Pokemon. And you." She gestured to the wall. "Clearly want answers about something." Ash looked at her. Really looked at her. He saw intelligence, ruthless capability, and a hidden loneliness that mirrored his own. "Fine," Ash said, "but I'm not riding in a ball." Cynthia blinked. "I wasn't going to put you in a Pokeball, Ash. I have a car." "Oh." Ash looked relieved. "Good. Those things are cramped." Before Cynthia could unpack that concerning statement, a high-pitched chime cut through the silence. Cynthia frowned, reaching into her coat to pull out her hollow caster. The device projected a blue light, displaying a code black alert. Her playful demeanor evaporated instantly. The champion returned. "Report." She snapped at the device. A frantic voice, distorted by static, crackled from the speaker. "Champion. We have a situation. Sector 4. The contact was lost. All of it." "Define lost," Cynthia demanded. "Gone, ma'am. The outpost near Eterna Forest. It's... The satellite shows a void. Just gray static, and it's expanding." Ash stepped closer, looking at the hologram. The image showed a topographical map of the forest. A perfect circle of nothingness had eaten a chunk of the woods. "The gray silence," Ash whispered. His voice was cold, devoid of the earlier curiosity. "It's starting." Cynthia looked at him sharply. "You know what this is?" Ash met her gaze. The reddish tint in his eyes flared, glowing in the dark ruin. "They aren't just testing weapons anymore," Ash said. "They're erasing the board." He turned toward the exit. "We need to go. Now." Cynthia didn't argue. She recalled Garchomp. "My car is this way." "Too slow," Ash said. He grabbed Cynthia's hand. She flinched at the contact. His skin was fever hot, but didn't pull away. "Ash, what are you?" "Hold your breath," he ordered. Space around them bent. The world twisted like a wrung-out towel. The ruins of Celestic Town folded in on themselves, colors smearing into streaks of light. For a split second, Cynthia saw the void, the infinite, terrifying gap between dimensions. Then, with a sound like a thunderclap, reality snapped back into place. They weren't in Celestic Town anymore. They were standing on the hood of her Jeep, parked miles away at the base of the mountain. Cynthia stumbled, clutching Ash's shoulder to steady herself as vertigo hit her like a hammer. She looked around, wide-eyed. He had teleported them instantly, without a Pokémon. She looked up at him. He was staring north, toward Eterna, his expression grim. "Drive," Ash said. Cynthia swallowed the 1,000 questions rising in her throat. She slid into the driver's seat, keying the ignition. The engine roared to life. As she sped onto the highway, casting a glance at the enigmatic young man in the passenger seat, Cynthia realized one thing with absolute certainty. Her life had just become infinitely more complicated, and she wouldn't have it any other way. Chapter 2 and Chapter 3. Fractured space. The forest did not end, it simply ceased to exist. Cynthia's Jeep skidded to a halt on the asphalt of Route 205, tires smoking. The headlights cut through the gloom of the early morning, illuminating a barrier of yellow police tape and hastily erected concrete barricades. Beyond that lay the Eterna Forest. Or rather, what used to be the Eterna Forest. A massive, semi-translucent dome of gray static had swallowed the landscape. It rose into the sky like a blister on reality, dwarfing the ancient trees. Inside the dome, there was no color. The vibrant greens of the moss and the deep browns of the bark had been bleached into monochrome shades of charcoal and ash. "It looks like an old photograph," Cynthia whispered, stepping out of the vehicle. She pulled her coat tighter against the sudden drop in temperature, or a dead channel on a television. Ash didn't open the door. He simply appeared standing next to the hood of the car. The transition was soundless, a mere flicker of displacement. "It's not dead," Ash said, his eyes scanning the perimeter. "It's paused. The time inside is moving, but the space has been locked. Nothing goes in, nothing comes out." A purely mechanical hum filled the air. Several officer Jennies were patrolling the perimeter, accompanied by Growliths that were whining, tails tucked between their legs. The dogs sensed it, the unnatural wrongness of the barrier. One of the officers approached, hand raised. "Ma'am, this is a restricted AR." She stopped, recognizing the blonde woman. Her posture snapped to attention. "Champion Sharona. We weren't expecting you." "Situation report," Cynthia commanded, her voice clipping with authority. She didn't look at the officer, she was staring at the gray wall. "We lost contact with the ranger station inside 3 hours ago," the officer said, her voice trembling slightly. "We sent a drone in. It just dropped." The feed cut to static. "Whatever is in there is jamming all electronic signals." "It's not jamming," Ash corrected. He walked past the officer, approaching the barrier. "It's deleting them." The officer blinked, noticing the strange young man for the first time. "Excuse me, sir, you can't be this close, it's unstable." Ash ignored her. He reached out a hand. "Ash, don't," Cynthia warned, stepping forward. Ash's fingertips brushed the gray veil. ZZZT. A spark of black lightning arced from the barrier to his finger. It wasn't electricity. It was a rejection of existence. Ash didn't recoil. He frowned, turning his hand over to inspect the singed glove. "Synthetic," he muttered. "They're using frequency modulation to mimic the properties of the distortion world. But it's crude, it lacks the chaos." He looked back at Cynthia. "I'm going in." "We are going in," Cynthia corrected. She released a Pokeball. "Lucario, stay close. Aura sight only." The jackal Pokemon materialized, immediately growling low in its throat. Lucario's aura appendages floated tensely, sensing the danger. "Your Pokemon will be heavy there," Ash warned. "The air is thick with null particles. He'll feel like he's breathing underwater." "He can handle it," Cynthia said. "Can you?" Ash didn't answer. He stepped forward. The gray veil rippled like mercury, swallowing him whole. Cynthia took a deep breath and followed. Inside, the world was silent. Not the quiet of a library, but the silence of a vacuum. The wind didn't blow. The leaves didn't rustle. Even the sound of their boots on the dirt seemed muffled, as if the air itself was stealing the vibrations. Everything was gray. The sky was a flat, slate sheet. The trees were pillars of iron-colored wood. "My signal is dead," Cynthia said, tapping her holocaster. "Nav is down." "Follow the fear," Ash said. He was walking with a strange, gliding gait, his head tilted. Someone is alive. Barely. They moved deeper into the woods. The deeper they went, the more wrong the geometry became. A path that looked straight would suddenly curve upwards. A tree would appear to be far away, but be within touching distance. Spatial distortion, Cynthia noted, fighting a wave of vertigo. It's disorienting. Only if you trust your eyes, Ash said. Don't look at the objects. Look at the space between them. He stopped abruptly, holding up a hand. 50 yards ahead, in a small clearing, was a campsite. Or the remains of one. The tents were shredded. A camp stove lay overturned. Huddled against the trunk of a massive oak tree was a girl. She wore a short dress and a white beanie, but they were covered in grime. She was clutching a piplup to her chest. The penguin Pokémon was limp, its blue feathers dull and gray-scaled. The girl was rocking back and forth, her eyes wide and unseeing. Dawn. Cynthia recognized her instantly. The coordinator. A rising star in Sinnoh. Cynthia ran forward, disregarding the spatial weirdness. She knelt beside the girl. Dawn? Can you hear me? Dawn flinched violently, letting out a sharp gasp. She looked at Cynthia, but her pupils were dilated, unfocused. The quiet took them. Ash stood a few feet away, surveying the perimeter. He didn't look at Dawn. He looked at the trees surrounding them. She's in shock, Cynthia said, her voice soft. She reached out to check the piplup. Her Pokémon is cold, ice cold. Ash turned his gaze to the piplup. It's being drained. The field is harvesting its bioenergy to sustain the barrier. How do we stop it? Cynthia demanded, pulling a potion from her coat. The potion won't work, Ash said flatly. Biology doesn't work right here. Chemistry is altered. He walked over, his shadow stretching unnaturally long in the diffused gray light. He knelt on the other side of Dawn. He didn't offer comfort. He grabbed Dawn's chin, forcing her to look at him. Dawn. Cynthia snapped. Be gentle. Ash ignored the champion. He stared into Dawn's eyes. His own eyes glowed with that unsettling reddish hue. Girl. Where are the ones in the white armor? Dawn blinked, tears streaming down her soot-stained cheeks. The intensity of Ash's gaze seemed to cut through the fog in her mind. The knights. They took the light. They put it in a box. Where? Ash pressed. Dawn raised a shaking hand, pointing toward the north, toward the old chateau deep in the woods. The old house. They made it a machine. Ash released her. He stood up. Good. Is that all? Cynthia glared at him, pulling Dawn into a protective embrace. She's traumatized, Ash. She needs medical attention. She needs the field to drop, Ash said coldly. Or she dies. The field is expanding. In an hour, it will metabolize her nervous system. Dawn let out a whimper. I won't let that happen, Cynthia vowed. She stood up, helping Dawn to her feet. Lucario, carry the piplup. Dawn, stick to me. They're coming, Ash said. He didn't shout. He didn't draw a weapon. He just turned to face the dense thicket of gray trees. From the static, figures emerged. They were humanoid, but clad in sleek, white tactical armor that had no seams. Their helmets were smooth glass domes with a single vertical slit glowing pale orange. They carried rifles that hummed with a sickly whine. Ether Null troopers. Target identified, one of the troopers synthesized. The voice was robotic. Anomaly detected. Biological signature. High. Threat level. Uncalculated. Stand down. Cynthia stepped forward, her presence radiating command. I am Champion Cynthia. You are operating illegally on League soil. The lead trooper didn't hesitate. Initiate suppression. 3 troopers raised their rifles. Lucario, Aura Sphere, Cynthia commanded. Lucario barked, gathering energy between its paws. But instead of the brilliant blue sphere of pure aura, a pathetic fizzle of gray smoke coughed out. Lucario looked at its hands, stunned. The dampening field, Ash noted dryly. It negates elemental projection. The troopers fired. Beams of concussive gray energy tore through the air. They weren't bullets, they were concentrated gravity waves. Cynthia braced herself, preparing to shield Dawn with her own body. She didn't have to. Ash stepped. He didn't run to intercept the fire. He folded the distance. One moment he was 10 feet away, the next, He was standing directly in the path of the beams. He raised his hand, palm open. The gravity beams hit his palm and stopped. They didn't explode. They simply ceased to have momentum. Ash caught the energy, crushed it in his fist, and let the dissipated sparks fall to the ground. The troopers paused. The tactical algorithms in their helmets flashed red errors. "You can't dampen me," Ash said. "I am not a Pokemon." He moved. This time, it wasn't a defensive step, it was an assault. Ash appeared in front of the lead trooper. He didn't punch. He placed his hand on the trooper's chest plate. Rend. Space twisted. The armor didn't break. It warped. The chest plate caved in as if a black hole had opened inside the trooper's ribcage. The soldier was launched backward with the force of a cannonball, smashing through 3 trees before coming to a halt. The other 2 troopers adjusted their aim. Ash dropped low, sweeping his leg. But his leg didn't just sweep the dirt. It swept the anchor point of the ground. The earth under the troopers liquefied for a split second, causing them to sink to their knees, then solidified instantly, trapping them in the rock. Ash rose. Dusting off his tunic, he walked over to the trapped soldiers. One raised his rifle. Ash grabbed the barrel and bent it 90 degrees with a casual flex of his wrist. He grabbed the trooper by the helmet and lifted him out of the stone encasement as if he weighed nothing. "The chateau," Ash said. "Who is leading you?" The trooper struggled, a mechanical hiss escaping the helmet. Unit 734. Silence protocol engaged." "Boring," Ash muttered. He tightened his grip. The glass faceplate began to crack. "Ash!" Cynthia shouted. "We need him alive." Ash paused. He looked back at Cynthia, then at the terrified Dawn, then back at the trooper. "He is alive," Ash said. "For now." He threw the trooper towards Cynthia. The armored man tumbled across the dirt, landing at the champion's feet. "Watch him," Ash ordered. "I'm going to break the machine." "Wait." Dawn's voice was small, trembling. She took a step away from Cynthia. Who are you?" Ash stopped. He looked at the girl. The blue hair, the wide, fearful eyes. He felt a flicker of memory. Something Dialga had shown him. A timeline where this girl smiled, where she fought beside a boy with a yellow mouse. A timeline that didn't exist here. "I'm the solution," Ash said. He turned toward the old chateau. The structure loomed in the distance, pulses of gray light emanating from its spires. "Stay close," Ash told them. "If you wander off, the space will eat you, and I don't have time to fish you out of a pocket dimension." Cynthia motioned for Lucario to guard the rear. She hoisted the prisoner up by his collar. "You heard him. Move." They advanced toward the chateau. The resistance grew stronger. The air became viscous, hard to push through. "Ash," Cynthia called out, breathing hard. "My Lucario. He's getting weaker. I feel it too. A headache, like pressure." "It's the gray plate," Ash explained, not slowing down. "Arceus created plates to bind reality. Fire, water, dragon. This is a forgery. A plate of null. It denies the existence of the soul." "A forgery of a god's tool?" Cynthia asked, horrified. "Who has that kind of technology?" "Someone who hates gods," Ash replied. They reached the gates of the chateau. The iron bars were rusted and twisted. The courtyard was filled with machinery, generators humming with the same gray light, cables snaking through the windows of the manor. In the center of the courtyard stood a man. He was tall, wearing a lab coat over tactical armor. He had a datapad in one hand and was adjusting a valve on a large, pulsating tank. Inside the tank, floating in a suspension of green fluid, was a Rotom. The plasma Pokemon was screaming silently, its energy being siphoned into the generators. "Efficiency is up 40%, the scientist muttered to himself. "Hey," Ash said. The scientist jumped, dropping his datapad. He spun around, flanked by 4 more troopers who emerged from the shadows. "Intruders!" The scientist shrieked. "How did you get past the perimeter?" Ash walked through the gate. The metal bars groaned and bent as his aura pushed them aside. "I walked," Ash said. He looked at the tank, at the tortured Rotom. Something in Ash's expression shifted. The cold detachment vanished. In its place came a fury that felt ancient. The air around him began to shimmer with heat. "You are using them as batteries," Ash said softly. "They are chaos." The scientist spat, regaining his composure. Chaotic variables. We are bringing order to the world. By neutralizing the variable, we create a perfect, silent system. Silence is for the dead, Ash growled. The scientist sneered. Kill him, and take the women for processing. The 4 troopers opened fire. This time, Ash didn't block. He vanished. He reappeared above them, dropping from the gray sky like a thunderbolt. He landed in the center of the formation. A shockwave of violet energy exploded from his impact point. Draco meteor, channeled through a human body. The ground erupted. The 4 troopers were blasted off their feet, their armor shattering under the pressure of the dragon energy. Ash stood amidst the dust. His eyes were glowing so bright they looked like dying stars. He walked toward the scientist. The man stumbled back, pulling a pistol. He fired. The bullets melted before they touched Ash's skin. Ash reached the tank. He placed his hand on the glass. Shatter. The glass exploded outward. The green fluid gushed onto the courtyard. The rotom fell out, wet and shivering. Ash caught the small Pokémon before it hit the ground. He cradled it, shielding it from the toxic air with his own aura. You. The scientist backed up against a generator. What are you? Ash looked up. His face was a mask of judgment. I am the variable you forgot to calculate. He raised his free hand toward the generator. Dialga, lend me a second. The air around the generator froze. Time stopped for the machine. The gears locked instantly while the energy kept pushing. Crunch. The generator tore itself apart, the kinetic energy having nowhere to go. It imploded, then exploded in a shower of sparks and metal. The gray dome above them flickered. The color began to bleed back into the world. The grass turned green. The sky turned blue. The silence broke, replaced by the sound of wind and bird calls. The scientist fell to his knees, defeated. Ash stood there, the rotom nuzzling into his neck. He looked at Cynthia and Dawn. Dawn was staring at him with awe. Cynthia was staring with calculation. The barrier is down, Ash said, his voice returning to its flat, unemotional baseline. He handed the rotom to Dawn. Take care of this, it's scared. Dawn took the Pokémon, her hands brushing Ash's. His skin was burning hot. Thank you, she whispered. Ash didn't smile. He turned back to the scientist. Now, Ash said, crouching down in front of the trembling man. Tell me about Valerian. The scientist's eyes widened. You know the name? I know the smell, Ash said, and you reek of him. Cynthia stepped up, placing a hand on Ash's shoulder. It was a grounding gesture. We take him in, Ash. We do this by the book. The League needs to know. Ash looked at her hand, then at her eyes. He hesitated. The violence in him wanted to end this man, to erase the threat to his family. But the anchor held. Fine, Ash said, standing up. The book. He looked at the sky. Far to the south, he felt a rumble in the earth. Palkia was shifting in his sleep. But the book better be long, Ash muttered, because the war has just started. Chapter 3 and Chapter 4. The Draconid's fury. The air in Hoenn tasted different. It was wetter, heavier, carrying the scent of salt and ancient volcanic ash. Meteor Falls was a cathedral of geology. Waterfalls didn't just fall here, they thundered, carving through miles of rock to create a subterranean labyrinth that felt more like the inside of a beast than a cave system. Ash stood on a slick, moss-covered ledge overlooking the central chasm. The roar of the water was deafening, but to him, it was white noise. He was listening for something else, a frequency. Dialga said the shard was here, Ash said, his voice low. He held his hand out over the abyss. A crystallized moment from the ancient era. If Valerian gets it, he can power his dampening field for a century. Behind him, Cynthia leaned against the damp rock wall. She looked out of place in her sleek black coat amidst the dripping stalactites, yet she radiated an effortless composure. Dawn was nearby, shivering slightly, holding her Piplup close for warmth. We're not alone, Ash, Cynthia said, her eyes scanning the shadows above them. My Garchomp is restless. There are dragons here, old ones. Draconids, Ash identified. Guardians of the Sky Pillar, they don't like visitors. And they definitely won't like us, Dawn added, looking nervously at the dark ceiling of the cavern. Especially since we broke the law getting into the region. Ash turned. Laws are lines on a map. The threat is global. Before Cynthia could retort with a lecture on international jurisdiction, the air pressure in the cavern dropped. It wasn't the dampening field this time. It was the displacement of massive lungs inhaling. A shriek tore through the cavern, a sound like metal shearing. From the darkness of the ceiling, a shape detached itself. It was blue, red, and terrifyingly fast. A salamence. But not just any salamence. This one wore a jagged anklet of raw meteorite. On its back rode a figure cloaked in a cape that snapped like a whip in the wind. Trespassers. The voice was wild, manic, and echoed off the stone walls. You bear the stench of the void. You pollute the holy air. The salamence dived. It didn't breathe fire. It simply turned itself into a living missile, aiming straight for the ledge. Cynthia, shield. Ash barked. Cynthia didn't hesitate. Garchomp, Dragon Rush. Her Garchomp materialized from its ball in a burst of light, intercepting the salamence in midair. The collision shook the cavern, sending loose rocks tumbling into the water below. The rider leapt from her dragon in the middle of the impact. She fell 50 feet, landing in a crouch on the ledge between Ash and Cynthia. She was small, wiry, with eyes that burned with a fanatical crimson light. Zinnia. The lorekeeper. She spun, a weighted cape swirling around her, and pointed a clawed gauntlet at Ash. I know what you are, Zinnia hissed, a feral grin splitting her face. I can smell the antimatter in your blood. You're an abomination. A leak in the world that needs to be plugged. Ash looked at her. He didn't take a fighting stance, he just observed. You're loud. Zinnia's grin widened. And you're going to bleed. She whistled. The salamence broke off its engagement with Garchomp and looped back, its throat glowing with Draco meteor energy. Dawn, get back, Cynthia ordered, stepping in front of the younger girl. No, Ash said. He stepped past Cynthia, walking toward the precipice. This isn't your fight. She's speaking dragon. I'll answer. Ash reached into the shadow of his own tunic. He pulled out a dusk ball, the only ball he carried, given to him by Giratina specifically for this creature because it refused to exist in normal space. Noivern, Ash whispered. Hunt. He threw the ball into the abyss. It didn't pop open. It imploded into a cloud of purple smoke. From the smoke, a Noivern exploded upward. It was massive, larger than its species standard, with wings that shimmered with a ghostly, translucent quality. Ash didn't wait. He ran toward the edge and jumped. Ash! Dawn screamed. Ash plummeted, the wind rushing past his ears. As the Noivern swept beneath him, he caught the fur of its neck, swinging himself onto its back with practiced ease. Let's dance, Ash murmured to the dragon. The Noivern screeched, a supersonic boom that shattered nearby stalactites, and rocketed upward to meet Zinnia's salamence. The battle wasn't a duel, it was a dogfight in a phone booth. The two dragons wove through the pillars of rock at breakneck speeds. Zinnia was laughing, a manic, joyous sound. She rode her salamence with her knees, her hands free to throw flash bangs and smoke pellets to disorient Ash. Is that all the void can do? Zinnia taunted, her voice amplified by the cavern acoustics. Run and hide? Ash leaned low against Noivern's neck. They were flying upside down, skimming the surface of the underground river. Gain altitude. Exit the cave. I need room. Noivern banked hard, pulling 9 gigaseconds, and shot toward the jagged opening in the cavern roof that led to the surface. Zinnia followed, hot on his tail. Mega evolve, she screamed. She tapped the key stone on her anklet. A burst of blinding light erupted behind Ash. The salamence transformed, its wings fusing into a single, crescent moonblade of aerodynamic perfection. Its speed doubled instantly. They burst out of meteor falls and into the open sky of Hoenn. The sun was blinding. Below them, the waterfalls cascaded down the mountain face. Above, the clouds were scattered. Air elate, Zinnia commanded. Double edge, the mega salamence became a blur. It slammed into Noivern's side with the force of a freight train. Ash was nearly thrown off. He lost his grip, sliding down Noivern's flank. He dug his fingers into the dragon's scales. Not hurting it, but anchoring himself with aura. Stabilize, Ash yelled. Noivern righted itself, spinning in the air to face the attacker. Ash stood up on the dragon's back. At 10,000 feet, the wind was tearing at his clothes. He looked at Zinnia, who was circling above him. "You fight well for a human," Ash called out. "I am not human," Zinnia yelled back. "I am the blood of the dragon. I am the voice of the sky." She dove again. This time, she didn't aim for the dragon. She aimed for Ash. The Mega Salamence's wing blade sliced through the air, aiming to decapitate him. Ash didn't dodge. Dialga's sight. He saw the path of the wing. He saw the exact millisecond it would connect. He jumped. He leapt off Noivern, directly toward the charging Salamence. Zinnia's eyes went wide. "He's insane." Ash passed over the razor-sharp wing, tucking his knees to his chest. For a split second, he was suspended in the air right next to Zinnia. Their eyes met. Hers were wild, full of fire. His were cold, endless deep pools of gravity. Ash reached out and grabbed Zinnia's cape. "Gotcha," he said. He yanked. Zinnia was pulled from her saddle. She gasped, flailing as she was ripped from her mount. Both of them began to freefall, two tiny figures tumbling through the blue sky, separated from their dragons. "You idiot!" Zinnia screamed, trying to grab her belt for a recall beam, but the wind whipped her hands away. "We'll both die." "I won't," Ash said calmly. He angled his body, diving faster to catch up to her. He grabbed her waist, pulling her close. They were falling terminal velocity toward the rocky spires of Meteor Falls. "Call your dragon," Zinnia yelled, struggling against his grip. "Call it." "No need," Ash said. He closed his eyes. He felt the space around them. The air rushing past. The hard reality of the ground approaching. He visualized the space between the atoms of the air. Spatial step. It was the largest jump he had ever attempted with a passenger. The air around them cracked like a whip. One moment, they were falling at 120 miles per hour. The next, they were standing on a flat plateau of rock, completely still. The sudden arrest of momentum should have liquefied their organs. But Ash had transferred the kinetic energy into the air itself. A massive sonic boom exploded above them, shattering the clouds where they had just been. Zinnia collapsed to her knees, gasping for breath. Her brain couldn't process the shift. She looked up at Ash, who was standing over her, brushing dust off his shoulder. "Cheater," she wheezed, her hand going to the dragon bone knife at her hip. Ash kicked the knife away before she could draw it. He knelt down, bringing his face level with hers. "I didn't kill you," Ash said. "Rayquaza would be annoyed if I broke his favorite toy." Zinnia froze. You dare speak his name?" "He's my cousin," Ash said, deadpan. "Sort of. It's complicated." "Liar." Zinnia lunged at him, tackling him to the ground. She straddled his chest, pinning his wrists. She was panting, her face flushed with adrenaline and rage. "You are filth. You are a creature of the shadow. You cannot know the sky." Ash looked up at her. He felt the heat radiating off her, the raw, unfiltered passion. It was intoxicating. It was so alive. Unlike the cold silence of the distortion world. "You want to see the shadow?" Ash asked softly. "Fine, look." He didn't use his hands. He used his mind. He pushed his own memories, his own perception of reality, directly into her frontal cortex. The vision. Zinnia gasped, her eyes rolling back. She wasn't on the mountain anymore. She was floating in the distortion world. She saw the impossible waterfalls. She saw the beauty of the silence. And she saw a small, lonely boy training with a god that looked like a nightmare, but treated him with a rough, terrifying tenderness. She felt Ash's solitude. She felt the burden of being a bridge between realities. And then she saw the truth of his power. It wasn't corruption. It was balance. Without the shadow, the light would burn everything away. The vision snapped. Zinnia blinked, returning to reality. She was still straddling him. Her breathing was ragged. Her anger had evaporated, replaced by a profound, shaking confusion, and something else. Curiosity. She looked down at him, seeing the human beneath the power. "You," she whispered. "You are alone." "I have family," Ash corrected, "but they aren't human." Zinnia slowly released his wrists. She sat back on his hips, not moving to get off. "You fight like a dragon," she admitted, a grudging respect coloring her tone. "You jumped. Without wings." "I knew you'd catch me," Ash lied. He didn't know that, but it sounded good. A faint blush dusted Zinnia's cheeks. She smirked, her canine teeth glinting. Next time, I drop you. Deal. The moment was shattered by a sound that vibrated the very bones of the mountain. It was a low, mechanical hum that rose in pitch until it became a scream. Ash shoved Zinnia off him and scrambled to his feet. He looked south, toward the sea, toward the sky pillar. A beam of gray light, thicker than any they had seen before, shot up from the ocean. It pierced the clouds, striking something high in the ozone layer. No, Zinnia breathed, horror washing over her face. The pillar. They found it. The sky turned a sickly, bruised purple. From the clouds, a shape fell. It was massive, emerald green, and serpentine. Rayquaza, the sky-high Pokémon. But it wasn't flying. It was convulsing. The gray light had shackled it, wrapping around its serpentine body like a constrictor snake. Rayquaza roared. A sound of agony that echoed across the entire region, and plummeted toward the ocean. Lord Rayquaza! Zinnia screamed. She scrambled to the edge of the cliff, reaching out as if she could catch a god with her bare hands. Ash was beside her in an instant. His face was a mask of cold fury. Valerian, Ash said. The name was a curse. Cynthia and Dawn arrived on the plateau, riding Cynthia's Garchomp. They looked shell-shocked. Ash! Cynthia yelled, sliding off the dragon. The readings. The global energy grid just flatlined. What just happened? They shot down the sky, Ash said. He turned to Zinnia. The lorekeeper was trembling. Tears of pure rage streamed down her face. She looked at Ash, her eyes pleading. They hurt him, she whispered. They broke the sky. Ash grabbed her shoulder. His grip was hard, grounding. Zinnia, he said sharply. Crying is for later. Can you fly? Zinnia wiped her face with her cape, smearing the dirt and tears. She looked at her Salamence, which had landed nearby, looking exhausted and reverted from its mega form. I can fly, she snarled, her voice regaining its edge. I can kill. Good, Ash said. He turned to Cynthia. Get the dropship. Or whatever transport the League has. We aren't investigating anymore. What are we doing? Dawn asked, her voice small against the wind. Ash looked at the column of gray light in the distance, where the sky god had fallen. His aura flared, visible now, a terrifying violet flame that made the air shimmer. We're going to war, Ash said, and I'm going to rip Valerian out of his armor piece by piece. Zinnia looked at him, and for the first time, she didn't see an abomination. She saw a leader. She saw a dragon in human skin. She stood up, drawing herself to her full height. The Draconids are yours, Walker, she pledged, her voice fierce. Save my god, and I will burn the world for you. Ash nodded. Let's hope it doesn't come to that. He walked toward the edge of the cliff, watching the smoke rise from the ocean. The hunt was on. Chapter 4 and Chapter 5. The Gray Silence Sutopolis city was a marvel of geology, a civilization built inside the crater of a dormant volcano, accessible only by air or submarine tunnels. It was a fortress of white stone and azure water. Now, it was a cage. From the ridge of the crater, Ash looked down. The usually vibrant city was under the shadow of a fleet. Massive, blocky airships hovered over the internal sea. They bore no flags, only the stark white insignia of Ether Null. They were arranged in a hexagonal formation, projecting a downward field of that sickening gray static. The water beneath them wasn't moving. The waves had been flattened by pure heavy gravity. In the center of the lake, trapped between the pressure of the ships and the ocean floor, lay Rayquaza. The sky-high Pokémon was coiled tightly, its emerald scales dull, glowing faintly as huge harpoons tethered it to the flagship above. They're bleeding him, Zinnia whispered. She was prone on the ridge next to Ash, looking through a pair of electronic binoculars. Her knuckles were white as she gripped the device. Those tubes. They're pumping his bioenergy directly into their engines. Not just engines, Ash corrected, his eyes narrowed. He could see the flow of energy, gold and green streams being sucked into the gray machinery. They are refining it. Distilling divinity into fuel. Cynthia crawled up beside them. She looked exhausted, her coat stained with soot from the skirmishes they'd fought just to get here. The League fleet is holding position 5 miles out, Cynthia reported. But we can't get past the blockade. They have a perimeter of gravity mines. Any ship that crosses the line gets crushed like a soda can. And the civilians? Dawn asked, her voice trembling but determined. She was checking a datapad linked to the city's emergency frequency. The residents are trapped in their homes. The air pressure down there is rising. If it keeps going up, the buildings will implode. Ash stood up. The wind on the crater rim whipped his hair, but he stood like a statue. We need to break the hexagon, Ash said. He pointed to the largest ship in the center, a flying fortress that hummed with a bone-rattling vibration. That one is the anchor. The silencer. If that falls, the gravity net collapses. It has shielding that shrugged off a hyperbeam from Wallace's melodic, Cynthia warned. It's impenetrable. Nothing is impenetrable, Ash said. Everything has a fault line. You just have to hit it hard enough. He turned to the group. Zinnia, take the air. Keep their fighters busy. I don't need you to win. I need you to be chaotic. Make them look at you. Zinnia grinned, a savage expression returning to her face. Chaos is my specialty. Cynthia, Ash continued, take the tunnels. Get your Garchomp and Lucario inside the city. Use the chaos to secure the civilian shelters. Dawn goes with you. Me? Dawn blinked. But I can't fight those soldiers. Ash looked at her. You aren't fighting. You're the anchor. These two, he pointed to Cynthia and Zinnia, are warriors. They see targets. You see people. Coordinate the evacuation. If the city panics, they die. Keep them calm. Dawn straightened, realizing the weight of the task. I can do that. I'll get on the broadcast tower. Good. Ash turned back to the crater. And you? Cynthia asked. What are you going to do? Ash stepped to the edge. His aura flared, no longer hiding. The violet light was so intense it cracked the rock beneath his boots. I'm going to knock on the front door. He fell forward. The descent was silent for the first 3 seconds. Then, the ether null sensors screamed. Ash didn't use a parachute. He didn't use a Pokemon. He used gravity manipulation to increase his density, turning himself into a living kinetic rod. He fell faster than physics should have allowed, aiming not for the ships, but for the water. Boom. He hit the surface of the crater lake. To the observers on the ships, it looked like a bomb had gone off. A geyser of water shot 200 feet into the air. Under the surface, Ash moved like a torpedo. The water pressure was immense, but his body, forged in the crushing depths of the distortion world, didn't care. He propelled himself upward, bursting out of the water directly beneath a frigate on the perimeter. He landed on the hull. The metal was slick and cold. Intruder alert. Hull breach on Sector 4. A mechanical voice blared from the ship's speakers. Troopers in white armor poured onto the deck. Ash didn't stop moving. He ran toward the main cannon. Fire. The squad leader screamed. Beams of gray energy tore up the deck plating. Ash slid underneath the volley, moving on his knees, momentum carrying him forward. He swept his leg, kicking up a sheet of metal plating to block the next round of fire. He leapt over the makeshift shield, grabbing the barrel of the main cannon. Palkia, lend me strength. He poured spatial energy into his grip. He didn't just bend the metal. He expanded the space inside the barrel. The molecular bonds screamed and snapped. The cannon bloated like a balloon, then ruptured. The backlash explosion sent the troopers flying. Ash stood amidst the smoke. He looked up at the central flagship, the silencer. It was still a mile away, surrounded by a swarm of drones. Too far to jump, he muttered. Above him, the sky screamed. Zinnia and the Draconids had arrived. A squadron of Salamence, Altaria, and Flygon dove from the clouds, breathing fire and dragon energy. The ether null anti-air batteries lit up the sky with gray tracer fire. For the sky high. Zinnia's voice echoed over the roar of battle. She was riding her mega Salamence, weaving through the flak, dropping flash grenades onto the enemy decks. The distraction worked. The formation broke. Ash saw his opening. He sprinted to the edge of the frigate and jumped, but he didn't aim for another ship. He aimed for a passing drone. He landed on the small, buzzing machine, his weight nearly crushing it. He grabbed its sensors, hacking its navigation with a pulse of aura. Up, he commanded. The drone whined and shot upward, carrying Ash toward the flagship. Inside the city, the situation was dire. Cynthia and Dawn had surfaced from the submarine tunnels. The streets were deserted, but the air was heavy with the humming of the dampening field. People were huddled in the Pokemon Center, terrified. The comms are jammed, Officer Jenny reported, looking at her static-filled radio. We can't tell the southern districts to evacuate. Dawn grabbed the radio. Give it to me. She pulled out her Rotom phone. Rotom, interface. Boost the signal using the local power grid. The Rotom buzzed, diving into the radio. Static cleared. Attention Sutopolis. Dawn's voice rang out, projected over the city's emergency speakers. She didn't sound like a terrified girl. She sounded like a coordinator announcing the grand festival. Her voice was steady, warm, and projected authority. This is a league-sanctioned evacuation. Do not run. Move to the lower tunnels. Blocks A through D, you are first. Follow the blue lights. Cynthia watched her for a split second, impressed. Dawn wasn't fighting the enemy, she was fighting the panic, and she was winning. Lucario, Garchomp, Cynthia ordered. Guard the tunnel entrance. Nothing gets past us. High above, Ash reached the silencer. He leapt off the hijacked drone just as an automated turret blew it out of the sky. He slammed into the side of the flagship, digging his fingers into the armored hull. He began to climb. The wind was ferocious here. He could see Rayquaza below, thrashing weakly. The great dragon's eye opened, locking onto Ash. A telepathic groan of pain washed over Ash's mind. Little Shadow. Hold on, Ash gritted out. He reached the observation deck. A window of reinforced glass separated him from the bridge. Inside, he saw him. Valerian. The man sat in a captain's chair that looked more like a throne. He was older, perhaps 50, with silver hair and a face that looked carved from marble. He wore a pristine white uniform. He wasn't watching the battle. He was watching a datapad, sipping tea. Ash didn't knock. He pulled back his fist. Violet energy swirled around his knuckles, condensing until it looked like a black hole the size of a baseball. Shadow punch. He struck the glass. The window didn't shatter. It disintegrated. The pressure seal blew, sucking papers and loose objects out into the sky. Ash stepped onto the bridge. The wind howled through the broken window, but the artificial gravity inside kept him grounded. Guards raised their weapons. Valerian raised a hand, stopping them. He turned his chair slowly. Ash Ketchum, Valerian said. His voice was smooth, cultured. The anomaly. I was wondering when the data point would manifest. Let him go, Ash said. He walked forward, ignoring the guards. Release the dragon. Gods are messy, Valerian said, standing up. He was tall, looming. They act on whim. They destroy cities because they are angry. They flood continents because they are sad. Humanity lives at the mercy of their tantrums. He tapped a device on his chest. A gray energy field flickered around his body. I am simply bringing order, Valerian continued. I am taking the gun out of the toddler's hand. You aren't bringing order, Ash retorted. You're bringing silence. A world without them is a dead world. A safe world, Valerian corrected. He moved. Ash had expected speed. He hadn't expected teleportation. Valerian appeared instantly in front of Ash, but it wasn't psychic teleportation. It was tech-based displacement. Valerian punched Ash in the gut. The fist was sheathed in the gray energy. It felt like being hit by a null void. Ash's aura collapsed on impact. The breath was driven from his lungs. He flew backward, smashing into the navigation console. My gray plate technology, Valerian explained, adjusting his cuff. It cancels binding energy. Your aura, your spatial tricks. They don't work on me. I am a blank spot in the universe. Ash coughed, spitting blood. He tried to stand, but his legs felt heavy. The hit had drained him. You stole that power, Ash wheezed. I engineered it, Valerian said. Now, stay down. Valerian turned back to the console. Process complete. The blood sample is secured. Eject the trash. He pressed a button. Below the ship, the harpoons detached from Rayquaza. But they didn't just let him go. The clamps exploded. Rayquaza roared in agony as the charges detonated along its spine. The dragon went limp, falling back into the water. No, Ash screamed. The rage took him. It wasn't the calculated anger of a warrior. It was the raw, instinctual fury of the distortion world. Ash's eyes turned completely black. The shadows in the room elongated, turning into claws. The temperature dropped to absolute zero. You hurt my kin. The voice wasn't Ash's. It was a chorus of him and Giratina. Ash lunged. He didn't use aura. He used pure antimatter. The gray field flickered as Valerian tried to block, but the antimatter didn't try to overpower the energy, it ate it. Ash tackled Valerian, driving him through the command table. They rolled across the floor, a tangle of limbs and energy. Ash was punching wildly, cracking Valerian's armor, bruising the perfect face. Monster. Valerian spat, firing a point-blank gravity pulse into Ash's chest. Ash took it. He didn't care. He grabbed Valerian's throat. The ship began to groan. The metal walls started to warp. Ash was unconsciously summoning a singularity. A black hole that would swallow the ship, the city, and everyone in it. Die, Ash hissed. The darkness expanded. The guards were screaming as they were pulled toward Ash. Ash. Stop. The voice cut through the red haze. It wasn't telepathy. It was Dawn, screaming over the bridge's open comms channel that Valerian had left open. Ash. The civilians are safe. Rayquaza is alive. Don't do this. If you break the ship, it falls on the city. You'll kill them all. Ash froze. His hand was clamped around Valerian's throat. The singularity was swirling behind him, a terrifying vortex. He looked at the comms panel. He heard Dawn's breathing. He heard the heartbeat of the thousands of people below. Humanity. Dialga's lesson. If you destroy the board to win the game, you are not a player. You are a disaster. Ash squeezed his eyes shut. He forced the darkness back. He exhaled, the blackness receding from his eyes. The singularity dissipated. He released Valerian's throat. Valerian gasped, scrambling back. He looked at Ash with genuine fear for the first time. You are unstable. I am holding back, Ash whispered. Valerian slammed his hand on an emergency teleport pad on his belt. Computer, emergency jump. Coordinates Alpha. Coward, Ash swiped at him, but he was a second too slow. Valerian dissolved into pixels of gray light, vanishing along with the small metallic case holding the vial of Rayquaza's blood. Ship integrity critical, the computer announced. Autopilot disengaged, falling. Ash looked around. The bridge was wrecked. The ship was tilting. He ran to the broken window. Zinnia, he roared into the wind. The Draconid didn't need to be told twice. The Mega Salamence swooped down, Zinnia hanging off the side with her hand extended. Ash jumped. He caught her hand. The impact nearly dislocated both their shoulders, but Zinnia didn't let go. She hauled him onto the dragon's back. Got you. She yelled. We have to go. This thing is coming down. The silencer, bereft of command and power, began to list heavily. It crashed not into the city, but into the crater wall, exploding in a massive fireball that shook the island. The sun was setting by the time the smoke cleared. The Ether Null fleet had retreated after their flagship fell. The siege was broken. Ash sat on the docks of Sutopolis, his legs dangling over the water. He was bruised, his tunic torn, covered in soot and blood, some his, some Valerian's. Rayquaza was resting in the shallows, tended to by Wallace and a team of frantic Chanseys. The dragon was alive, but its aura was dim. It would sleep for a long time. Footsteps approached. Cynthia, Zinnia, and Dawn sat down beside him. None of them spoke for a long time. He got away, Ash said finally. He has the blood. We saved the city, Dawn said softly. She reached out, placing her hand on Ash's trembling fist. You saved the city, Ash. You stopped yourself. Ash looked at her hand. It was small, warm, human. I almost killed everyone, Ash admitted. I wanted to erase him. The silence, it was so loud. That's why you have us, Zinnia said, surprisingly gentle. She was cleaning her knife with a cloth. Dragons have tempers. We are the anchors. Cynthia looked at the horizon. Valerian has the blood of a mega-evolved god. He has technology that can nullify aura, and he knows exactly what you are now. He called me a variable, Ash murmured. He was wrong, Cynthia said. She leaned her head on Ash's shoulder, a gesture so intimate and casual it shocked the nearby League agents. You aren't a variable anymore. You're the king on the board. Ash looked at the three women. The scholar, the warrior, the heart. He felt the fatigue settle in. Not physical fatigue. He could run for days, but spiritual exhaustion. The gray plate had scarred his soul. I need to go home, Ash whispered. Just for a bit. The distortion world. I need to heal. We're coming with you, Zinnia said immediately. Ash shook his head. It's dangerous, the physics. We're coming, Cynthia stated, finality in her tone. Valerian will be hunting you. We aren't letting you out of our sight. Don nodded, squeezing his hand. Besides, I've never seen a ghost world before. Ash looked at them, then let out a rare, small smile. Fine, he said. But don't eat the purple fruit, it tastes like sorrow. He raised his hand. The air in front of them twisted. A portal to the reverse world opened, a swirling vortex of gravity and silence. Together, the walker and his circle stepped into the shadow. Chapter 5 and Chapter 6. Shadow of the soul. The concept of down was the first thing to die. For Cynthia, Zinnia, and Dawn, the transition through the portal wasn't like walking through a door, it was like falling through a mirror that dissolved into oil. One moment, they were on the solid docks of Sutopolis. The next, their internal organs did a somersault, and their feet touched, or rather, adhered to, a surface that defied explanation. Dawn screamed. It was a reflexive, terrified sound as she looked up and saw a waterfall crashing toward her face, only to shatter into mist and float sideways before it hit her. Breathe, Ash's voice came from somewhere to her left. She turned. Ash was walking on the vertical face of a floating obsidian pillar, perpendicular to them. He looked pale, the gray bruising from Valerian's attack standing out starkly against his skin, but he moved with an eerie, fluid grace. Here, he wasn't just a visitor. He was part of the architecture. Don't fight the gravity, Ash instructed, stepping off the pillar and rotating in midair to land softly beside them on the floating island. If you fight it, you'll throw up. Just trust that your feet will stick. Cynthia was clutching her stomach, her face a shade of green that matched her Garchomp's scales. She forced herself to stand upright, her analytical mind reeling. The atmospheric pressure. It's fluctuating. My altimeter reads negative infinity. Electronics don't like it here, Ash said. He sat down on a jagged rock, wincing as he clutched his chest. Welcome to the reverse world. The backstage of reality. Zinnia was the only one not looking nauseous. She was staring wide-eyed at the horizon, if you could call it that. It was a swirling vortex of purple clouds and distant, floating ruins. It was chaotic, primal, and to a draconid, strangely spiritual. It's quiet, Zinnia whispered, but loud. I can hear the air humming. That's the antimatter, Ash murmured. He began to unbutton his torn tunic. It holds the atoms together by pushing them apart. He shrugged the tunic off. Dawn gasped. Ash's torso was a roadmap of scars. Some were old, burns, cuts, puncture wounds from sparring with legends. But the new wound, the one from Valerian, was terrifying. A spiderweb of gray veins was spreading from his sternum, pulsing with a dead, static light. It looked like cracked porcelain. Ash. Dawn reached out, her hand hovering over the wound. It looks like it's eating you. It is, Ash said matter-of-factly. The null energy is trying to delete my aura. I need to wash it off. The ground beneath them rumbled. A deep, tectonic vibration that shook the floating island. From the violet abyss below, a shadow rose. It was colossal. First came the six-winged tentacles, dripping with black smoke. Then the golden carapace, armored and ancient. Finally, the head, a serpentine nightmare with glowing red eyes the size of carriage wheels. Giratina. The renegade. Cynthia stiffened, her hand instinctively going to her belt. Zinnia dropped to one knee, overwhelmed by the sheer draconic pressure. Dawn simply froze, clutching Piplup so hard the bird squeaked. The great dragon hovered in front of the island, its massive body coiling around the rock. It lowered its head until it was mere feet from Ash. The breath from its nostrils smelled of ozone and old iron. You were broken, little shadow, the voice projected into their minds. It wasn't a voice of words, but of heavy, grinding concepts. I had a bad day, Ash replied out loud, looking his father figure in the eye. He didn't flinch. He leaned forward, resting his forehead against the dragon's cold, golden snout. The intimacy of the gesture was shocking. To the world, Giratina was a devil. To Ash, this was a greeting. The gray silence, Giratina rumbled. the red eyes narrowing as he sensed the wound. A poison of nothingness. It offends me. Can you fix it? Ash asked. Painfully. Giratina pulled back. He turned his head, exhaling a stream of blue fire onto a nearby depression in the rock. The fire didn't burn. It liquefied into a glowing, viscous pool of raw spectral energy. Submerge, Giratina ordered. Ash stood up. He looked at the women. This is going to look bad. Don't interfere. If you touch the pool, you'll unmake yourselves. He walked to the edge of the glowing blue pit and stepped in. He didn't splash. He dissolved. His skin seemed to peel away, turning into smoke. His muscles unraveled. For a moment, he was just a silhouette of violet light screaming in silence as the antimatter tore the gray corruption out of his soul. Ash! Dawn cried out, lunging forward. Cynthia grabbed her arm, holding her back. Don't, Dawn. Look. In the pool, the gray veins were being forced out, rising like black tar to the surface and evaporating. The violet light was knitting Ash back together, brighter and stronger than before. It lasted a minute, but it felt like an hour. Then, the liquid calmed. Ash emerged, gasping for air, pulling himself onto the rocky bank. He was shaking violently, steam rising from his wet skin. The gray web was gone. Giratina lowered his head again, nudging Ash's shoulder with enough force to knock over a truck, but to Ash, it was a gentle prod. Rest, the dragon commanded. I will watch the door. Giratina floated away, coiling himself around a distant spire, becoming a silent sentinel against the void. Here, Zinnia said, handing Ash his tunic. She had tried to clean the blood off it with a damp cloth from her pack. Ash took it, his hands still trembling. Thanks. They had set up a makeshift camp on the island. It was a strange picnic, sitting on purple moss, surrounded by floating rocks, eating dried rations from Cynthia's survival kit. The atmosphere had shifted. The terror of the environment had faded, replaced by a profound curiosity. So, Cynthia said, breaking the silence. She was watching Ash eat. He ate with efficiency, not enjoyment, like he was fueling an engine. This is where you grew up. Ash nodded, swallowing a protein bar. From 5 to 18. Give or take, time is loose here. Alone? Dawn asked softly. Not alone. Ash gestured to the empty air. There are others. Spirits. Ghosts. And the trio visits. Dialga taught me history. Palkia taught me physics. Giratina taught me survival. But no people? Dawn pressed. No friends? No birthday parties? Ash tilted his head, looking genuinely confused. What is a birthday party? The question hung in the air, heavier than the gravity. Dawn's eyes welled up. She covered her mouth. Oh, Ash. I didn't need parties, Ash said defensively. I had training. I had the hunt. That's not a childhood, Ash, Cynthia said gently. That's a soldier's boot camp. It was necessary, Ash said. He looked at his hands. Humans are fragile. I had to become durable. Zinnia was lying on her back, looking up at the swirling clouds. It explains why you fight like that, she said. You fight like a wild thing. No rules. Just cause and effect. She sat up, looking at him with intense eyes. But it must have been lonely. Even dragons fly in packs sometimes. Ash didn't answer immediately. He looked out at the distortion. I used to watch, he admitted quietly. Through the puddles. The reflection pools. I could see the other world. I saw kids playing with Pokemon. I saw them laughing. I didn't understand the laughter. It seemed inefficient. He looked at Dawn. But when I heard you on the radio today, saving those people, I realized the efficiency isn't the point. The connection is the point. Dawn reached out and took his hand. This time, he didn't flinch. He let her hold it. Her hand was warm. His was cool, like stone. You aren't just a weapon, Ash, Dawn whispered. You're a person, and you have a pack now. Cynthia smiled, a soft, rare expression. A very troublesome, high-maintenance pack, but yes. Zinnia grinned, sharpening her knife. And we bite back. Ash looked at them. The three women who had followed him into hell without hesitation. He felt a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with aura. It was terrifying. It was better than gravity. Ash started, but his voice caught. He was saved from the emotional moment by a sound like a ticking clock. amplified a billion times. Tick. The space in front of them fractured. A blue light spilled out, blindingly bright against the twilight of the distortion world. From the light, Dialga stepped out. The temporal Pokémon was majestic, his metallic blue plating shining with the light of a million stars. The diamond on his chest pulsed with a rhythm that synced with their heartbeats. The timeline is bleeding, Dialga stated. His telepathy was different from Giratina's. It was crisp, precise, and urgent. Ash stood up immediately, the fatigue vanishing. "What do you see, Uncle?" "Possibilities," Dialga said. "Since the incident with the Sky Warrior, the threads of fate have unraveled. Valerian has the blood. He is building something." "Show me," Ash demanded. "It is not pleasant, show me." Dialga nodded. A beam of blue light shot from his diamond, enveloping Ash, Cynthia, Zinnia, and Dawn. The vision. They were standing in a city. It looked like Jubilife, but it was wrong. The buildings were all identical gray blocks. There were no trees. There was no sky, just a dome of static mesh. People were walking in the streets, but they walked in perfect unison. Left, right, left, right. They wore identical gray jumpsuits. Their faces were blank, devoid of emotion. There were no Pokémon. Not a single Pidgey on a wire. Not a pet Growlithe on a leash. The world was sterile, silent. In the center of the city stood a statue. It was Valerian, holding a globe. The inscription read, "Order restored. Chaos purged." The view zoomed out. The entire planet was covered in the mesh. The oceans were still. The volcanoes were plugged. The wind didn't blow. It was a dead world. A preserved corpse of a planet. Then, the vision shifted to the Hall of Origin. Arceus, the creator, was there. But he was shackled. Massive chains of gray energy bound his 1,000 arms. He was asleep, trapped in a nightmare, his infinite energy being siphoned to power the static world. And at the foot of Arceus's prison lay a body. It was Ash. He was older, battered, lying on his back with a spear of gray light through his chest. He was alone. The vision snapped. They were back on the floating island. Dawn was sobbing openly. Zinnia looked sick. Cynthia was pale, her hands shaking. Ash stood like a statue. He wasn't crying, he wasn't afraid. He was angry. "He kills the noise," Ash whispered. "He kills the struggle. He thinks peace is the absence of life." "This is the path of the null," Dialga said solemnly. "Valerian seeks to use the DNA of Rayquaza to create an anti-evolution. A devolution wave that strips the divine spark from all living things. Pokémon will cease to be magical creatures. They will become just meat. And humans will become gears." Ash turned to look at his reflection in a pool of water. He saw the boy raised by monsters. He saw the chaos in his own eyes. "I am the chaos," Ash said. "You are the balance," Dialga corrected. "But you cannot fight him as a god, Ash. If you fight him with pure power, you destroy the world you are trying to save. That is why you failed in the vision. You fought alone." Ash looked at his hands. Then he turned to the women. Cynthia stepped forward. Her shock had been replaced by a cold, steely resolve. The champion was back. "We need a plan," she said. "Not just a brawl. We need to dismantle his network. We need to find his lab." "I can track the blood," Zinnia said, her voice growling. "Rayquaza's blood calls to me. It's screaming. It's in the north. The Crown Tundra." "Galar," Cynthia realized. "Of course. The darkest energy spots are there." Dawn wiped her eyes. She stood up, looking small but fierce. "I'm not letting that future happen. I'm not wearing a gray jumpsuit." Ash looked at them. The vision showed him dying alone. But here, now, he wasn't alone. "Dialga," Ash said. "How much time do we have?" "The convergence begins in 3 days," Dialga replied. "When the moons align over the crown shrine." 3 days, Ash repeated. He clenched his fist. The violet aura flared around him, but this time, it was controlled. It wasn't wild. It was focused. "Giratina," Ash called out. The great dragon uncoiled from the spire, floating closer. "Open the door," Ash commanded. "Not to Sinnoh, to Galar." Giratina huffed, a sound like a crumbling mountain. "You leave too soon. You are not fully healed." "I'll heal on the way," Ash said. He looked at Cynthia, Zinnia, and Dawn. "We have a god to hunt." He offered his arm to Cynthia. She took it. Zinnia grabbed his other shoulder. Dawn held onto his belt. "Don't let go," Ash said. "The jump to Galar is rough. The space there is Dynamaxed." "Just get us there," Zinnia said, grinning wildly. "I want to punch someone." Ash smiled. A real, dangerous smile. "Good, because I'm done being the janitor." Now, Ash's eyes glowed. "I'm the executioner." The shadows swirled around them. The floating island dissolved. The silence of the distortion world was left behind, swapped for the noise, the chaos, and the impending war of the human world. The Walker was returning, and he was bringing the storm with him. Chapter 6 and Chapter 7. The summit of Betrayal. The Indigo Plateau was usually a place of celebration, a coliseum where dreams were forged in gold and glitter. Tonight, however, it was a fortress. Storm clouds choked the Kanto sky, heavy and bruised with unspent rain. Inside the grand hall, the air conditioning was humming too loudly, trying to scrub away the scent of ozone and wet wool. Ash stood in the corner of the private council chamber, his back pressed against the mahogany paneling. He had refused a chair. He had refused the hors d'oeuvres. He wore a fresh tunic, this one dark gray with high collars, provided by Cynthia to cover the bandages on his chest. He looked less like a bodyguard and more like a weapon left leaning against the wall. Around the massive circular table sat the most powerful humans on the planet. Stephen Stone of Hoenn was polishing a metagrossite pin, his eyes darting around the room with calculated paranoia. Lance of Johto sat with his arms crossed, his cape pooling around him like a pool of blood. Diantha of Kalos looked weary, her usual cinematic grace replaced by the hollow look of someone who had read too many casualty reports. And Leon of Galar was vibrating with restless energy, tapping his finger on the table. Cynthia stood at the head of the table. She didn't look tired, she looked dangerous. "The threat is not regional," Cynthia said, her voice cutting through the low murmurs. She projected a hologram from the center of the table, a rotating model of the silencer airship they had destroyed in Sutopolis. "Ether Null has technology that bypasses type effectiveness. They have synthesized a frequency that shuts down infinity energy. If we do not unite our military assets immediately, there won't be a Pokemon League by next month. There will just be a police state." "You're asking for a unified command," Lance rumbled, his voice gravelly. "That violates the sovereignty of the individual leagues. My G-men are already stretched thin." "Sovereignty is a luxury for the living," Cynthia snapped. "Valerian is hunting gods, Lance. He captured Rayquaza. He drained it. Do you think he'll stop there? He'll come for Lugia. He'll come for Ho-Oh. He'll come for the Tapas." Ash watched them. To him, they looked like children arguing over rules in a sandbox while a tide was coming in. "He's right," Ash said. The room went silent. 5 pairs of eyes turned to the corner. "Excuse me?" Diantha asked, raising an elegant eyebrow. "Who is this?" "Associate. I was told he is your security detail, Cynthia." Ash pushed off the wall. He walked into the light. The strange, shifting depth of his eyes unsettled them. "I'm the one who cleaned up the mess in Sutopolis," Ash said bluntly. "Lance is right. Your G-men can't help." Lance bristled. "And why is that, boy?" "Because they rely on their Pokemon," Ash said. "And Valerian turns Pokemon into paperweights. You don't need an army of trainers. You need a strike team that can fight when the magic turns off." "And I suppose you're the leader of this strike team?" Leon asked, a challenging grin forming on his face. "I'm the bait," Ash corrected. The heavy oak doors creaked open. Zinnia and Dawn entered, looking out of place among the suits and capes. Zinnia was prowling, her hand resting on her knife. Dawn looked nervous, clutching a tablet, but she held her head high. "Refreshments," a voice announced. A retinue of servers entered, carrying silver trays with crystal glasses. The liquid inside was a deep, rich red, an expensive berry vintage from Kalos. Ash frowned. He sniffed the air. "Ash," Dawn whispered, moving to his side. "What's wrong?" "The air pressure," Ash murmured. "It didn't change when the doors opened." The servers began placing glasses in front of the champions. One server, a woman with fiery red hair and glasses, placed a glass in front of Cynthia. She smiled, a tight, professional smile that didn't reach her eyes. "A toast," the woman said, her voice smooth like velvet, to unity. Cynthia reached for the glass. Ash's pupils contracted. Time slowed. Dialga's warning. He didn't see a vision of the future. He saw a detail in the present. The liquid in Cynthia's glass wasn't swirling. It was perfectly still, despite the vibration of the server's hand. It was heavier than wine. Denser. Magma. Don't drink it, Ash roared. He moved. He didn't use a spatial step. The room was shielded, the geometry locked down by dampeners hidden in the walls. He used raw, explosive speed. He vaulted over the table, scattering papers and holograms. Cynthia froze, glass halfway to her lips. Ash slapped the glass out of her hand. It shattered against the far wall. The red liquid didn't splash. It hissed, melting through the plaster and the steel reinforcement behind it with terrifying speed. "It's acid," Steven shouted, jumping up and recalling his metagross. The server with the red hair didn't panic, she smirked. Reflexes of a wild animal, she noted. She raised her hand. A wrist-mounted device clicked. Thwip. A needle, thin as a hair and glowing orange, shot from her wrist. It wasn't aimed at Cynthia. It was aimed at Ash, who was mid-air, unbalanced from saving the champion. The needle struck Ash in the neck, right above the collarbone. Ash landed in a crouch, ripping the needle out instantly, but it was too late. Fire. Not the fire of a Charizard or a Moltres. This was the heat of the Earth's core. It flooded his veins, instantly boiling his blood. It wasn't a chemical toxin. It was distilled essence of Heatran, corrupted and weaponized. Ash gagged, clutching his throat. His vision swam. The room tilted sideways. The violet aura he usually commanded flickered and died, suffocated by the intense, burning agony spreading through his nervous system. "Ash!" Zinnia screamed, drawing her knife. "Seal the room," the server commanded. She tore off her uniform, revealing the red tactical armor of Ether Null, but customized with the Elite Four insignia of Kalos. "Malva," Diantha gasped, stepping back. "You? Order requires sacrifice, Diantha," Malva said, her hands igniting with gray flame. A perversion of her fire-type specialty. "The world is burning. Valerian offers the only extinguisher." The windows of the chamber exploded inward. A dozen Null troopers repelled in from the storm outside. At the same time, the hidden dampeners in the walls hummed to full power. "My Pokeballs," Leon shouted, grabbing at his belt, "they won't open." "The gray field," Cynthia hissed. She grabbed a steak knife from the table, shifting instantly from diplomat to combatant. "Don, get under the table. Zinnia, cover Leon." "I don't need cover," Leon shouted, grabbing a heavy chair. Ash fell to his knees. The heat was consuming him. He couldn't breathe. His lungs felt like they were filled with ash. He tried to focus on the space between the atoms to escape, but the pain scrambled his mind. He was grounded. Mortal. "The target is the walker," Malva announced, pointing a flaming finger at Ash. "Kill him. The champions are irrelevant." 3 troopers leveled their gravity rifles at Ash. Ash couldn't see them. His vision was a blur of red static. "Zinnia." Ash choked out. "Eyes." Zinnia didn't hesitate. She didn't run to him. She understood the command. She leapt onto the table, making herself the central point of the chaotic battlefield. 3 targets, 12 o'clock, 10 meters, Zinnia yelled. Ash didn't think. He trusted. He lunged forward blindly. He couldn't use his spatial rend, but he still had the muscle density of someone raised in 10x gravity. He slammed into the first trooper. He grabbed the rifle barrel, ignoring the heat, and drove the butt of the weapon into the trooper's helmet. Crunch. "Duck." Don's voice rang out from under the table. Ash dropped flat. A beam of gray energy singed the hair on the back of his head. "Left. Kick." Zinnia barked. Ash swept his leg out. He felt contact, armor plating. He twisted his hips, snapping the leg bone beneath the armor. He was fighting like a feral beast, guided by the voices of his pack. Malva watched, disgusted. He fights like a blind dog. She stepped forward, gathering a massive ball of gray fire. "Let's put him down." She hurled the fireball. "Ash, block, high center," Cynthia screamed. Ash raised his arms, crossing them in an X. The fireball hit him. It didn't burn his skin. It burned his energy. It felt like being hit by a freight train made of depression. Ash was thrown backward, smashing through the heavy oak table. He landed in a heap of splinters and glass. He didn't get up. Ash, Dawn crawled out from her hiding spot, scrambling toward him. No. Cynthia intercepted her, shoving Dawn behind Leon. He's still alive. Barely. Malva walked toward the wreckage of the table. The other champions were engaged in hand-to-hand combat with the troopers. Steven was surprisingly lethal with a metal briefcase. Lance was using his cape to blind enemies. But they were losing. Without their Pokémon, they were just humans. Malva stood over Ash. He was gasping, his eyes unfocused, sweat steaming off his skin as his body tried to metabolize the magma toxin. You are an error in the code, Malva said coldly. She raised her boot, heel poised to crush his windpipe. Boom. The door to the chamber didn't open, it dissolved. A Garchomp burst through, not from a Pokeball, but from the hallway. It was Cynthia's ace. It had physically smashed its way through the building, fighting the dampening field with sheer, unadulterated rage. It tackled Malva. Malva was thrown across the room, slamming into the wall. We're leaving, Cynthia commanded. Leon, the window, Steven, the door. I can't walk, Ash wheezed. The toxin had paralyzed his legs. Zinnia was there. She didn't offer sympathy. She grabbed him by the back of his tunic and hauled him up. Then you fly, she grunted. She dragged him to the broken window. The storm was raging outside. Rain lashed into the room. Jump! Zinnia yelled. She threw herself and Ash out of the skyscraper. Dawn followed, screaming. Cynthia recalled her Garchomp into a heavy, resistant ball and dove after them. They fell into the night. Dragonite, Lance's voice bellowed from above. Lance had jumped too. In midair, away from the concentrated dampeners of the room, his Pokeball worked. His Dragonite emerged, catching the falling group. They landed hard on the wet grass of the Indigo Plateau Stadium field, far below the tower. Ash rolled onto the grass, coughing up black bile. The rain sizzled when it hit his skin. He's burning up, Dawn cried, cradling his head. His temperature is over 105. He's going to cook from the inside. The toxin is specifically designed to overheat his antimatter core, Cynthia analyzed, checking his pulse. It's trying to force a critical mass detonation. A giant holographic projection lit up the side of the League Tower. The static cleared, revealing the face of Lord Valerian. He looked serene. Behind him was not a lab, but a snowy, ancient landscape. Citizens of the world, Valerian's voice boomed across the plateau, amplified by the stadium speakers. Tonight, the false idols fall. The champions could not protect themselves. How can they protect you? The image shifted. It showed a massive column of ether null troops marching up a snowy mountain. In the background, the ruins of ancient pillars pierced the sky. Spear pillar. I stand at the threshold of the hall, Valerian continued. I carry the blood of the sky. I carry the plate of silence. Tonight, I ascend to the realm of the Creator. And when I return, there will be no more chaos, no more monsters, only silence. The feed cut. Ash tried to sit up. He failed. He's at Mount Coronet, Ash whispered, his voice like grinding glass. He tricked us. The Crown Tundra was a supply depot. He's going for Arceus. He can't get into the hall, Steven said, joining them on the field, wiping blood from his lip. The azure flute is lost. He doesn't need the flute, Ash coughed. He has the blood. He's going to brute force the lock. Ash grabbed Cynthia's arm. His grip was weak, trembling. You have to. Take me there. You're dying, Ash, Cynthia said, her voice cracking. We need a hospital. A hospital can't fix this, Ash rasped. I need cold, absolute cold. Zinnia looked at him, rain plastering her hair to her face. Ice type? No, Ash said, his eyes rolling back in his head. Time. I need to stop the flow. He pointed a shaking finger at Dawn. Dialga gave you a boon in the woods. Dawn blinked, confused. Then she remembered. When they were in the gray silence, when Ash had handed her the Rotom, he had transferred a small amount of temporal energy to her to keep her anchored. I don't know how to use it, Dawn cried. Don't use it, Ash whispered. Share it. Give me the stillness. Dawn looked at Cynthia. The champion nodded grimly. Dawn leaned down. She didn't know what to do, so she did the only thing that felt natural. She placed her hands on Ash's cheeks and pressed her forehead against his. "Be still," she whispered. "Please, just be still." A faint blue light pulsed from Dawn's skin. It wasn't a technique. It was a prayer. The residual energy of Dialga resonated with Ash's body. The boiling in his veins didn't stop, but it slowed. The agonizing fire became a dull roar. The timeline of the poison was stretched, buying him hours instead of minutes. Ash slumped back, unconscious but stable. Cynthia stood up, looking at the other champions. "Lance, secure the plateau," she ordered. "Root out the traitors. Leon, Steven, Diantha. Rally whatever forces you have that don't rely on energy projection. Fighting types, rock types." "Where are you going?" Leon asked. Cynthia looked north, toward the distant Sinnoh region. Her Garchomp landed beside her, sensing her intent. Zinnia was already hoisting Ash's unconscious body onto the dragon's back. "We're going to crash a coronation," Cynthia said. She climbed onto the Garchomp, pulling Dawn up behind her. Zinnia took the rear, holding Ash in place. "To Spear Pillar," Cynthia commanded. The Garchomp roared and launched into the storm, flying straight into the teeth of the wind, carrying the broken demigod and his queens toward the end of the world. Chapter 7 and Chapter 8, The Pillars of Creation. Mount Coronet did not look like a mountain anymore, it looked like a pyre. From the back of Cynthia's Garchomp, the summit was a blinding beacon of gray light. The storm clouds were swirling in a reverse funnel, drawn down toward the peak where the fabric of reality was being surgically removed. Ash lay against Zinnia's back, drifting in and out of a fever dream. His skin was burning hot, his veins tracing patterns of magma under his flesh. "Wake up, little shadow." The voice wasn't Giratina's, it was sharper, frantic. "Palkia. The lock is breaking. He is turning the key." Ash gasped, his eyes snapping open. They weren't brown or red anymore. They were a milky, terrifying white. The toxin had blinded him physically, forcing him to see solely through aura. "Drop us," Ash rasped. "We're at 20,000 feet. Dawn screamed over the wind. And the anti-air flak is thick." "Drop us," Ash roared, his voice cracking, "or there won't be a ground to land on." Cynthia didn't question him. She banked hard, putting the Garchomp into a suicidal dive. Below them, the slopes of Spear Pillar were crawling with the white armor of Ether Null. Thousands of troops. Walkers, massive, crab-like tanks, climbed the vertical rock faces, their cannons blasting apart the wild Pokémon defending their home. "Hold on," Cynthia yelled. Garchomp slammed into the snow-covered plateau just below the final ascent. The impact sent a shockwave of snow and rock outward, knocking over a squad of troopers. Zinnia rolled off the dragon, dragging Ash with her. She propped him up against a boulder. "Can you stand?" Zinnia asked, checking her knives. Ash didn't answer. He placed his hand on the rock. He could feel the mountain screaming. The ley lines were being strangled. "He's at the pillars," Ash whispered. "He's playing the music." A sound, dissonant and wrong, drifted down from the peak. It sounded like a flute, but played by a machine that didn't understand melody. It was a mathematical sequence of notes designed to force a door open. "We have to get up there," Cynthia said, surveying the battlefield. Between them and the peak stood a battalion of elite Null troopers and 3 heavy walkers. "We can't fight an army," Dawn said, her voice trembling as she looked at the sea of enemies. "We don't have to," Ash said. He stood up. His legs shook, but he locked his knees. He raised his hands to the sky. He wasn't reaching for the gods. He was reaching for the family. "Hear me," Ash screamed. It wasn't a shout. It was a psychic projection that blanketed the mountain. "The usurper comes. He steals your breath. He steals your fire. Rise." The ground shook. From the caves, from the snowdrifts, from the sky, they answered. Abomasnow charged out of the tree line. Weaviles darted from the shadows. A flock of Staraptor dived from the clouds. Garchomps, wild and furious, dug their way out of the rock. It wasn't a coordinated army, it was a riot of nature. "Go," Ash commanded. The wild Pokémon crashed into the Ether Null lines. It was a massacre of metal and fur. "Cynthia, Zinnia," Ash said, his blind eyes fixed on the peak. Clear the path. I need to get to the altar. On me. Cynthia shouted. Garchomp, earthquake. Her Garchomp slammed its fists into the ground. The earth fractured, swallowing a heavy walker whole. Zinnia was a blur of motion, her Mega Salamence swooping down to pick off snipers while she ran on foot, carving through the troopers who got too close to Ash. Ash walked. He didn't run. He couldn't. Every step was agony. The magma toxin was eating his nervous system, but he walked with a terrifying purpose. A trooper blocked his path, raising a rifle. Ash didn't break stride. He reached out with his left hand. Space. Compress. The air around the trooper's helmet collapsed. The helmet imploded. Ash stepped over the falling body. Dawn. Ash called out. Dawn was behind him, protecting his rear with her Mamoswine, summoned from her reserves. I'm here. Be my eyes, Ash ordered. Tell me the distance. The stairs are 300 yards ahead, Dawn shouted. But there's a barrier, a gray wall. No barrier, Ash grunted, blood trickling from his nose. Just a suggestion of physics. He reached the gray energy wall. It was the same tech that had trapped the forest, but denser. It stripped the will to live from anything that touched it. Ash placed both hands on it. His skin sizzled. Open, he commanded. He didn't use a key. He used his own soul as a wedge. He poured his aura into the wall, overwhelming the null frequency with sheer, chaotic noise. The wall shattered like glass. Ash stumbled forward, falling to one knee. Ash. Dawn tried to help him up. Leave him, Zinnia yelled, decapitating a robot drone. He has to walk it. Keep the soldiers off him. Ash forced himself up. He climbed the ancient stairs of Spear Pillar. The summit was silent. The wind didn't blow here. The snow didn't fall. Everything was suspended in the gray. In the center of the ruins stood Valerian. He was playing the azure flute, or a twisted, mechanical replica of it. The sound was agonizing. Above the altar, the sky had torn open. The Hall of Origin was visible, a staircase of light leading into a dimension of pure creation. But the light was dimming. The gray corruption was creeping up the stairs, turning the gold to lead. Stop, Ash yelled. Valerian stopped playing. He turned. He looked at Ash, bloody, blind, dying, and smiled. You are persistent, Valerian said, like a cockroach. You cannot cage him, Ash wheezed, stepping onto the platform. I am not caging him, Valerian corrected. I am evicting him. He pressed a button on the remote console attached to his wrist. Initiate phase null. 3 massive pylons around the summit activated. They fired beams of anti-energy directly into the rift. The Hall of Origin shook, and then, the Guardians fell. It wasn't a poetic descent. It was a crash. First Dialga. The Lord of Time was ripped from the dimension. His blue armor was dull, grayed out. He fell from the sky, slamming into the stone ruins with the weight of a dying star. He screamed, a sound of raw animal pain. Then Palkia. The Master of Space was dragged down, his pearls shattered. He crashed next to his brother, writhing, unable to control the space around him. Finally, the shadows boiled, and Giratina tried to emerge to save them, but the gray light burned his shadows away. Giratina was forced into his altered form, stripped of his origin power, and pinned to the ground by gravity beams. The creation trio lay on the stone, gasping. They were no longer gods. They were just giant, frightened beasts. No. Ash fell to his knees. He felt their connection to him sever. The family bond was gone. He couldn't hear their voices. Do you see? Valerian walked over to the prone form of Dialga. He kicked the dragon's snout. Dialga flinched. They are just meat, Valerian said. Powerful meat, yes. But without the infinite energy, they are biology. And biology can be controlled. He aimed a pistol at Dialga's eye. Don't touch him. Ash tried to lunge, but his legs finally gave out. He collapsed on the stone. Valerian laughed. Look at you. The Walker of the Veil. You're just a boy who spent too much time in the dark. He turned back to the rift, and now, for the architect. Valerian raised the mechanical flute again. The rift widened. A blinding white light began to emerge, Arceus. But as the creator tried to manifest, the gray beams hit him. The light flickered. The creator paused, trapped between dimensions, unable to enter a world that was rejecting divinity. Ash, Cynthia, Zinnia, and Dawn crested the stairs. They stopped, horrified by the sight of the fallen legends. "Stay back," Valerian commanded, "or I put a bullet in the Time Lord's brain." Cynthia froze, her hand hovering over a Pokeball. She calculated the odds. They were 0. Ash lay on the cold stone. He couldn't see, but he could feel. He felt Dialga's fear. He felt Palkia's confusion. He felt Giratina's rage. And he felt something else. Deep inside him. Past the toxin. Past the antimatter. Past the human flesh. The Lake Guardians, Mesprit, Azulf, Yuxi, had once gifted a human the ability to bind the world. The Red Chain. But the Red Chain wasn't an object. It was a state of being. It was the unshakable will to connect. Ash's fingers dug into the stone. "You're wrong," Ash whispered. Valerian glanced back. "What?" Ash pushed himself up. He was shaking violently. Blood dripped from his eyes, staining his tunic. "You think." "Silence is order," Ash rasped. "You think. Removing the power makes it safe." He stood up. He swayed, but he didn't fall. "But the power isn't in the biology," Ash said. His voice began to echo, layering over itself. "The power is in the bond." Ash closed his blind eyes. "Mesprit, Azulf, Yuxi, lend me the spirit." A new light flared. Not violet, not gray, red. A chain of burning red energy erupted from Ash's chest. It wasn't physical, it was made of pure emotion. It whipped out, lashing around Dialga, Palkia, and Giratina. The trio roared. The chain didn't hurt them, it reconnected them. It bypassed the gray dampening field because it wasn't based on energy, it was based on feeling. "What is this?" Valerian shouted, checking his scanner. "Reading unquantifiable. It's not energy, it's data. No, it's sentiment. It's the soul, you idiot," Ash snarled. He grabbed the red chain with his bare hands. The heat was intense, burning his palms, but he pulled. "Get up." He hauled the gods to their feet. Dialga's eyes flared blue. The gray faded. Palkia's pearls began to glow pink. Giratina's shadows returned, darker and deeper than before. They didn't regain their full divinity. The dampening field was still strong, but they regained their will. They regained their fight. "Kill him!" Valerian screamed at his pylons. The beams intensified, focusing on Ash. "Shield him!" Cynthia screamed. She didn't need to tell them. Zinnia threw herself in front of Ash. Dawn threw herself in front of Ash. Cynthia threw herself in front of Ash. And the dragons moved. Dialga stepped in front of the women, taking the beam on his diamond chest. Palkia warped space, deflecting the second beam. Giratina swallowed the third beam into a dimension of nothingness. Ash stood in the center of the formation, the human heart of the divine storm. "Valerian," Ash roared. He opened his eyes. The white blindness was gone. His eyes were burning red, the color of the chain. "You wanted a god." Ash stepped forward, the red chain pulsing in his hands like a whip. "You wanted to see what happens when the leash comes off." Valerian backed away, his composure shattering. This is impossible. The math doesn't allow for this." "The math doesn't account for how stubborn I am," Ash said. He swung the chain. It didn't hit Valerian. It hit the mechanical flute in his hand. Snap. The device shattered. The discordant music stopped. The rift to the Hall of Origin snapped shut. Arceus was safe, sealed away from the corruption. But the gray field was still active. The pylons were still humming. Valerian was still armed with the power of the void. "Fine," Valerian spat, dropping the broken flute. He ripped off his coat, revealing a suit of armor made entirely of the gray plate material. "If I can't banish the gods, I will kill their pet." He drew a sword. A blade of pure null energy. It looked like a tear in reality. "Ash," Cynthia warned. "That blade. If it cuts you, you cease to exist." Ash didn't draw a weapon. He didn't have one. He looked at his hands. The red chain faded, its job done. The trio was back in the fight, dismantling the pylons. It was just Ash and Valerian. "Let's finish it," Ash said. He dropped into a stance. No aura. No space bending, no time tricks. Just the boy who fell from time, ready to fight the man who wanted to kill it. Chapter 8 and Chapter 9. The God of Nothing. The blade made no sound as it cut the air. That was the most terrifying thing about it. A normal sword whistled, a lightsaber hummed, even an energy beam crackled. But Valerian's weapon, a jagged shard of concentrated void projected from a hilt of white ceramic, simply deleted the sound waves it passed through. Ash didn't dodge with his eyes. He dodged with the hairs on his arms, sensing the vacuum pressure. He threw himself backward, his boots skidding on the frost-covered stone of Spear Pillar. The tip of the null blade passed inches from his nose. It didn't touch him, yet the air pressure drop was so severe it ruptured the capillaries in his left nostril. Blood trickled down, bright red against his pale, toxin-ravaged skin. Sloppy, Valerian critiqued. He moved with the eerie grace of a machine, his heavy gray armor making no noise. Your reaction time has degraded by 0.4 seconds since the start of the engagement. The heat is cooking your synapses. I'm just warming up, Ash spat, wiping the blood away. He lunged. Without the ability to project aura or manipulate space, Ash was forced to rely on the one thing the creation trio couldn't give him, but had forced him to develop: raw, brutal kinetics. He stepped inside Valerian's guard, slipping under a horizontal slash. He drove his elbow into Valerian's solar plexus. It was a strike that would have caved in the chest of a Machamp. Clang. It felt like hitting a solid wall of lead. The gray plate armor absorbed the kinetic energy instantly. There was no recoil, no stagger. Valerian didn't even blink. He simply looked down at Ash. Newton's third law does not apply to me, boy. Valerian brought the pommel of his sword down. Ash twisted, taking the hit on his shoulder. The bone cracked audibly. Ash grunted, rolling away and springing back to his feet, favoring his left arm. Ash! Dawn's scream tore through the wind. Ash glanced peripherally. The battle for the summit was chaotic. Cynthia's Garchomp and Zinnia's Salamence were holding the line against the remaining Ether Null elites, a whirlwind of claws and fire. Behind them, the creation trio, Dialga, Palkia, and Giratina, were focusing their immense, recovering power on the three pylons generating the dampening field. They were busy. Ash was alone. Don't look at them, Valerian said, walking forward. Look at your end. He thrusted. The void blade extended, stretching like taffy. Ash didn't have room to dodge. He raised his right hand, the one wrapped in the remnants of the red chain's energy. He caught the blade. It was madness. The void energy should have erased his hand instantly. But the red chain, the manifestation of willpower, flared. It acted as a buffer, a metaphysical glove. The void sizzled against the red light, sparks of black and crimson showering the ground. Ash roared, his muscles straining as he held the blade of nothingness inches from his heart. You talk too much. Ash twisted his hips and kicked Valerian's knee. This time, he didn't aim for impact, he aimed for leverage. He hooked the leg and pulled. Valerian stumbled. It was a micro-victory, but Ash capitalized. He released the blade and slammed his head into Valerian's helmet. The impact stunned them both. Ash staggered back, vision swimming. Valerian took a step back, shaking his head. Inefficient, Valerian muttered. He touched the cracked visor of his helmet. You fight like a beast. Emotional, desperate. He reached into a compartment on his belt. He pulled out the vial, the one containing the distilled blood of Rayquaza, now mixed with the gray fluid. I need to accelerate the timeline, Valerian stated. He didn't drink it. He jammed the vial into an injection port directly over his heart. No. Zinnia shrieked from across the battlefield, seeing the sacrilege. The liquid pumped into Valerian's suit. For a second, nothing happened. Then, the sound returned. A scream. Not human. It was the digital shriek of code being rewritten. Valerian arched his back. The white ceramic of his suit began to bubble. It turned dark gray, then black. Spikes of solidified null energy erupted from his shoulders. His helmet melted, fusing with his skull, reshaping into a sleek, draconic visage that lacked eyes or a mouth, just a smooth, blank surface. The air around him died. The snow stopped falling in a 10-meter radius. Gravity ceased to function. Rocks began to float. I am the silencer, The entity that was once Valyrian broadcasted. It wasn't spoken, it was vibrated into their bones. I am the 0 point. He raised a hand. Displacement. Ash didn't have time to blink. The world shattered. Spear Pillar vanished. The storm vanished. The screams of his friends vanished. Ash was standing in a white void, infinite, featureless white. Welcome. Valyrian's voice echoed from everywhere. To the null space. A pocket dimension carved out of reality. Here, there are no variables. Only me. Ash spun around. Nothing. Just white. You can't hide in a box, Ash yelled. I am not hiding, Valyrian replied. I am the box. The floor beneath Ash turned into quicksand. He sank to his knees. He struggled, but the white substance was heavy, sticky. It felt like apathy. This is what the world feels like without the chaos of the soul, Valyrian lectured. Peaceful, isn't it? No pain, no struggle. It's boring, Ash growled. He closed his eyes. He stopped fighting the physical restraint and reached out with his senses. Palkia. Space. Dialga. Time. Giratina. Antimatter. He felt. Nothing. The connection was severed. The dimension was hermetically sealed. They cannot hear you, Valyrian mocked. A giant hand composed of gray static formed in the air, descending to crush Ash. You are just a human. Without your gods, you are nothing. Ash looked up at the descending hand. The pressure was immense. His bones creaked. The magma toxin in his blood was spiking, his heart rate erratic. Just a human. Ash laughed. It was a dry, raspy sound. You still don't get it, Ash whispered. He remembered the lessons. Giratina hadn't taught him to use antimatter. Giratina had taught him to endure the crushing weight of a world that didn't want him. Palkia hadn't taught him to bend space. He taught him that boundaries were illusions. Dialga hadn't taught him to see the future. He taught him that the present is the only moment that matters. I don't need them to hear me, Ash said, standing up. The white quicksand hissed as his aura flared. Not violet, not red, but a blinding, pure gold. The color of a human soul burning at maximum output. I am the lesson. Ash punched the empty air. Crack. The white void fractured like a mirror. Valyrian recoiled, the giant static hand dissolving. Impossible. You cannot generate kinetic force in a vacuum. I brought my own physics, Ash roared. He ran. He didn't run on the ground. He ran on the cracks in the reality he was creating with every step. The white void shifted. Valyrian tried to rewrite the environment. Ice Age. Suddenly, they were in a frozen wasteland. Ash didn't slow down. He melted the ice with his sheer body heat. Volcanic hell. Magma erupted. Ash leapt from rock to rock, moving faster than the heat could register. The void. Total darkness. Ash closed his eyes and navigated by the intent of his enemy. He reached Valyrian, who stood in the center of the chaos, a towering figure of gray armor. Die. Valyrian swung the null blade. Ash didn't dodge. He caught the blade again. With his bare hand. The flesh burned away, revealing the bone, but Ash didn't let go. He clamped his skeletal fingers around the energy. Got you, Ash hissed. Valyrian tried to pull back, but Ash was an anchor. Palkia taught me that space is distance, Ash said, his voice overlapping with the roar of a dragon. So I'm removing the distance. Ash stepped into Valyrian. He phased. His body overlapped with the armor. Valyrian screamed. A sound of static feedback. Get out. You are contaminating the system. Dialga taught me that time is a sequence, Ash continued, ignoring the agony of his molecular structure fighting the armor. So I'm stopping your clock. Ash placed his free hand, the glowing, golden hand, directly onto the core of Valyrian's chest, where the Rayquaza blood was pumping. And Giratina. Ash smiled, blood staining his teeth. Giratina taught me that if you stare into the abyss long enough. Shadows erupted from Ash's back. Massive, tendril-like wings of antimatter that tore through the white void. The abyss bites back. Shadow force. 0. Ash didn't push energy in. He pulled energy out. He turned his body into a black hole. He siphoned the infinity energy, the Rayquaza blood, the gray plate power, all of it. He drank the godhood out of Valyrian. No, it's too much, you'll burn, Valerian shrieked. I've been burning since I was 5 years old, Ash screamed back. The pocket dimension couldn't handle the paradox. A human absorbing a synthetic god. Crack. Snap. Boom. The white void shattered. They exploded back into reality at the summit of Mount Coronet. The shockwave leveled the ruins. The 3 pylons disintegrated. The Ether Null army was knocked flat. In the center of the crater, 2 figures stood, Ash and Valerian. Valerian's armor was gray and dead. The spikes had crumbled. The null blade was gone. He fell to his knees, gasping, reaching for a weapon that wasn't there. My silence. He wept. It was perfect. Ash stood over him. Ash looked terrifying. His tunic was gone. His skin was translucent, glowing with a chaotic mix of violet, blue, and gold energy. He looked like a star contained in the shape of a man. His right arm was skeletal, the flesh gone. His eyes were burning holes in reality. Your silence was lonely, Ash said. His voice sounded like it was coming from a radio tuned to 3 stations at once. Ash raised his hand. He didn't kill him, he didn't need to. He reached out and tapped Valerian's forehead. Spatial rend. Exile. Valerian's eyes went wide. No, not there. Please, not there. Space folded. Valerian was pulled inward, stretching like spaghetti. He wasn't sent to the distortion world. He wasn't sent to another region. He was sent to the gap between seconds. A place of absolute, timeless nothingness. The silence he had craved, he now had forever. Valerian vanished. The wind returned to the mountain. The snow began to fall again. The gray clouds dissipated, revealing the stars. The war was over. Ash stood there for a moment, looking at the stars. Beautiful, he whispered. Then, his legs evaporated. He didn't fall. He simply began to dissolve. The energy he had absorbed, plus the toxin, plus the strain, was too much. His physical form could no longer hold his soul. Ash. The scream came from 3 throats. Cynthia, Zinnia, and Dawn scrambled over the rubble. Ash collapsed. Cynthia caught him before he hit the ground. She fell to her knees, cradling his head. Her coat was soaked in melting snow and his glowing blood. Stay with me, Cynthia ordered, her voice breaking. That is a champion's order, Ash, stay with me. Ash looked up at her. His vision was fading. He saw Zinnia grabbing his hand, her tears falling onto his face. He saw Dawn hugging his legs, sobbing. Behind them, the creation trio gathered. Dialga lowered his head, a soft chime emanating from his chest. Palkia bowed. Giratina coiled around the group, creating a barrier of wind to protect them from the cold. I'm tired, Ash whispered. His left hand, the one that still had skin, reached up to touch Cynthia's cheek. The noise is back. That's good. Don't you dare, Zinnia snarled, squeezing his skeletal hand. You don't get to leave. You promised me a fight. Rain check, Ash wheezed. His body flickered. His legs were gone, replaced by motes of light drifting upward. The dissolution was spreading to his chest. He's ascending, Cynthia realized with horror. He's turning into pure energy. He's becoming a guardian. Make him stop. Dawn yelled at the dragons. Dialga. Turn back time, fix him. Dialga shook his head sadly. The timeline is fixed. To alter it now would unravel the victory. He chose this price. I don't care about the price. Dawn screamed. Ash coughed, a cloud of gold dust escaping his lips. It's okay, he said. He looked at them, his family. I was the walker, he murmured. I walked alone. He looked at Cynthia. You taught me to lead. He looked at Zinnia. You taught me to feel. He looked at Dawn. You taught me to hope. He smiled. A genuine, boyish smile that looked out of place on his dying face. Not a bad life. For a janitor. His chest dissolved. Ash. Cynthia screamed as the weight in her arms vanished. Ash Ketchum shattered into a billion particles of light. The light didn't fade. It shot upward, swirling into a pillar of gold and violet that pierced the heavens. It mingled with the aurora borealis, painting the night sky in colors that had no names. On the summit of Spear Pillar, surrounded by 3 gods and the ruins of an empire, 3 women knelt in the snow, holding on to nothing but the memory of the boy who had saved the world by breaking it. The wind howled. And for the first time in his life, Ash Ketchum was everywhere. Chapter 9 and Chapter 10. The Choice. The universe was warm. That was the first surprise. Ash had expected the afterlife, or whatever stage of existence lay beyond burning out his soul, to be cold. He expected the silence of the distortion world or the static hum of the void. Instead, it felt like sitting by a campfire. He was floating in a sea of gold. Fragments of memories drifted past him like autumn leaves. He saw Palkia adjusting the gravity of a falling star. He saw Dialga winding the clock of a galaxy. He saw Giratina curling around a black hole to sleep. And he saw them. Cynthia, shouting orders with tears in her eyes. Zinnia, fighting an army with a knife and a grin. Dawn, glowing with the blue light of a prayer. You are untethered, little shadow, Dialga's voice echoed, not from the outside, but from the memory itself. You have burned the vessel. You are free to join the flow. Ash reached out to the golden light. It was peaceful. It was easy. To become energy meant no more pain. No more magma toxin. No more loneliness. But then, he felt a tug. A thin, red thread wrapped around his wrist. Then another around his ankle. Then another around his waist. They weren't chains. They were lifelines. Don't you dare, Zinnia's voice snarled through the ether. Stay with me. Cynthia's command cut through the peace. Please, Dawn's whisper was the strongest of all. Ash stopped drifting. He looked at his hand, a hand made of starlight. He clenched it into a fist. I'm not done, Ash said to the universe. The gold shattered. Pain. The warmth vanished, replaced by the crushing weight of gravity. His lungs dragged in air that tasted of disinfectant and stale flowers. His nerves, which had been singing with cosmic energy, were now screaming with the dull, throbbing ache of healing flesh. He's stabilizing. BP is 110/70, pupil response returning. The glow is fading. Get the champion. Tell her he's back. Ash groaned, trying to open his eyes. His eyelids felt like lead shutters. When he finally peeled them apart, the light was blinding. He wasn't on a mountain. He was in a bed. A very soft, very white bed. Machines beeped rhythmically beside him. Tubes were running into his arms. He tried to sit up. He couldn't. His body felt like it belonged to someone else, someone heavy and weak. Hey, a soft voice came from his right. Easy. You've been out for 3 weeks. Ash turned his head. Dawn was sitting in a chair pulled right up to the bedside. She looked exhausted. Her blue hair was tied back in a messy bun, and she was wearing an oversized hoodie that looked suspiciously like one of his old tunics. She was holding his hand with both of hers. Dawn, Ash croaked. His voice sounded rusty, unused. Dawn let out a sob that was half laugh. Hi, did we win? Yes. Dawn wiped her eyes with her sleeve. Valerian is gone. The ether null surrendered. The gods went home. Ash let his head fall back onto the pillow. He closed his eyes, searching for the hum. The constant, background noise of the trio. The sense of where every atom in the room was. The foresight of the next second. Silence. Just the beep of the monitor and the sound of rain against the window. It's quiet, Ash whispered. They're gone. No, a new voice said from the doorway. They aren't gone. They're just quiet. Cynthia walked in. She looked impeccable as always, black suit, heels. But the dark circles under her eyes told a different story. She carried 2 cups of coffee. She placed them on the table and walked to the other side of the bed. She didn't hesitate. She leaned down and kissed his forehead. It was a lingering, possessive gesture. Welcome back to the land of the living, Ash, she said softly. I feel heavy, Ash complained. That's called being human, Cynthia said, stroking his hair. Your body had to reconstruct itself from the molecular level. The trio. They helped. But they couldn't give you back the power. It would have killed you a second time. So I'm normal? Ash looked at his hands. They were scarred, battered, but they were just hands. No glowing veins. No spatial distortion. Define normal. A rough voice drifted from the window ledge. The curtains parted. Zinnia was perched on the sill, crouched like a gargoyle. She hopped down, prowling toward the bed. She looked wild as ever, but she had a bandage on her arm and a new scar on her cheek. She stopped at the foot of the bed, crossing her arms. She looked at him for a long moment, assessing him. You look weak, she decided. Come here and say that, Ash challenged, a faint smile touching his lips. Zinnia grinned. She launched herself onto the bed, ignoring the protests of the medical staff who had just entered, and straddled his legs, careful not to hurt him but asserting her presence. You owe me a fight, she whispered, leaning close, but for now, I'll settle for you not dying. Ash looked at them. Don holding his hand. Cynthia guarding his left. Zinnia claiming his legs. The harem. The circle. His pack. I'm not going anywhere, Ash promised. Recovery was boring. Ash Ketchum, who had leapt between dimensions and wrestled dragons, found his greatest enemy was physical therapy. The hospital in Harem City was under siege, not by soldiers, but by the media. The story of the Walker of the Veil had leaked. The boy who commanded the gods. The savior of Spear Pillar. Ash watched the news from his room. They had footage of the battle, grainy, terrifying shots of him glowing gold and shattering reality. They want a statement, Cynthia said one evening, turning off the TV. She was peeling an apple for him with a knife that cost more than his old house. The League wants to give you a medal. The scientific community wants to study your DNA. The religious sects want to worship you. Ash took a slice of apple. I want to go for a walk. You can barely stand, Ash. I can walk, Ash insisted. He pushed the covers off. He swung his legs over the side of the bed. His feet touched the cold floor. He pushed himself up. His knees wobbled, threatening to buckle. Cynthia moved to catch him, but he held up a hand. No, Ash gritted out. I have to do this. Gravity is heavy, but I have to carry it. He took a step, then another. He made it to the window. He looked out at the city. Lights, cars, people. A world of noise and chaos. I don't fit, Ash said quietly. I know how to fight gods. I don't know how to pay taxes. I don't know how to exist in this. Cynthia walked up behind him, wrapping her arms around his waist, resting her chin on his shoulder. You don't have to fit, she said. You just have to be. We'll handle the taxes. I can't stay in a tower, Cynthia, Ash said, looking at her reflection in the glass. I can't be a statue. The walker has to walk. I know, she sighed, tightening her grip. That's why I brought you something. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, velvet box. Inside wasn't a ring. It was a badge case, but it was empty. A clean slate, Cynthia said. No favors. No god mode. Just a trainer ID. If you want to find your place in this world, Ash, you have to travel it. Not as a janitor cleaning up messes, but as a traveler. Ash touched the empty case. A journey. A real one, Cynthia confirmed. But, she added, her eyes narrowing playfully, don't think you're going alone. Don has contests to win. Zinnia has been banned from Hoenn airspace for reckless dragon riding, and needs to lay low. And well, I have accrued a lot of vacation time. Ash laughed. It was a genuine sound, free of the rasp of the void. 2 weeks later, they stood at the shores of Lake Verity. The media had been diverted by a well-placed rumor, started by Malva, who was currently working off her sentence as Cynthia's PR manager, that Ash was recovering in Alola. It was just the four of them. The sun was setting, painting the water in shades of orange and violet. The air was crisp. Ash wore jeans, a black t-shirt, and a simple red vest. He carried a backpack. He looked normal. Except for the eyes. They were brown again, but if you looked deep enough, you could still see the stars. So, Zinnia said, kicking a stone into the water. Where to, Kanto? Johto? Unova? I don't care, Ash said. He breathed in the air, anywhere. Dawn was holding her Piplup, smiling brighter than the sun. I heard the contests in Johto are amazing. Johto it is, Cynthia decided. I need to have a word with Lance anyway about his security protocols. Ash walked to the edge of the lake. The water rippled. From the center of the lake, 3 translucent figures rose. Mesprit. Azulf. Yuxi. They didn't approach. They just hovered, watching. Behind them, the space shimmered, a window. Through the window, Ash saw them. Dialga, nodding solemnly. Palkia, raising a claw. Giratina, blinking his red eyes slowly. Walk well, son, the collective thought brushed against Ash's mind. The door is always open. but try to use the front door next time." Ash smiled and waved. The shimmer faded. The gods vanished. He was alone. Well, not alone. A rustle in the tall grass. "Pika." Ash froze. He turned slowly. A Pikachu stood there. It wasn't a special Pikachu. It wasn't glowing. It was just a chubby, yellow mouse with jagged stripes and an attitude. It looked at Ash, ears twitching. Ash knelt down. He extended a hand. "Hey," Ash said. "I'm Ash." The Pikachu sniffed his hand. It sensed something, the residual scent of ozone and antimatter. It sneezed, sparks flying from its cheeks. "Pikachu," it chirped, rubbing its cheek against Ash's palm. Ash laughed. He reached into his belt. He didn't have the Master Ball. He didn't have a Dusk Ball. He pulled out a standard, red and white Pokeball. He had bought it at the mart for 200 credits. "You want to come?" Ash asked. "It's going to be a long walk." The Pikachu tapped the button with its tail. The ball clicked open. The red light engulfed the mouse. Wiggle. Wiggle. Click. Ash picked up the ball. It was warm. It vibrated with life. He stood up and turned to the women waiting for him. Cynthia, the queen who would rule the world by his side. Zinnia, the dragon who would fight the world for him. Dawn, the star who would light the path. Ash spun the Pokeball on his finger. "All right," Ash said, his eyes shining with the adventure to come. "Let's go." He stepped onto the dirt path, leaving the shadows behind, walking into the sunlight of a brand new day. Chapter 10 End story complete.